and County Buildings Council chambers located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Brookfield's website. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue. Please note that if you're calling in for public comment and would like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. Again, if joining virtually for public comment, the number is 855-695-3744 and press *3 to be placed in the queue. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. And please call several minutes before the agenda item and press *3 to ensure you're in the queue. If joining in person, we'll ask you to come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and you'll have the time assigned. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson? Here. Cohen?
Here.
Hinkle? Here. Jezierski?
Here.
Leslie?
Here.
Lamb? Here. Lindstedt?
Here.
He's remote. He's here.
Here. Did you hear me?
Okay, I know we're having audio issues. I see you.
Okay. Marsh? Olson?
Here.
Yeah. Chef?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Thank you. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. The clerk will be assisting with timekeeping, and council members will be able to see their time on the podium. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may remove or add items to the consent, and council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Seeing none. Are there any objections to this agenda being? Staff has asked me to note that the title for item 18A on the agenda was originally incorrect, referencing humanitarian patrol instead of humanitarian parole. The agenda was updated to correct the clerical error. Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. This evening, we'd like to take time to celebrate the recently reconstructed Broomfield Community Center, along with the beloved Alder Recreation Center. Tina Eichner, the owner and editor of Our Broomfield magazine, is here to present awards to our Director of Recreation, Parks, and Senior Services, Clay Shuck. Will you both please come to the podium? Tina Eichner, the owner and editor of Our Broomfield magazine, is here to say a few words. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tied for first place, the Broomfield Community Center and Palmer Recreation Center won by a vote of Broomfielders, the best fitness center health club in this year's Our Favorite Readers' Choice Contest. Thank you to all who voted, and congratulations to the winners. Facilities shine. Ms. Eichner, would you like to make any comments? And then Mr. Shuck.
Oh, I would just like to thank you all for letting me come this evening and present these awards. We really have fun with our community awards that are selected by our readers that include the whole population of Broomfield. And as a lifelong resident of Broomfield and a patron of both of these facilities, my husband and I both, just find them to be treasures of Broomfield, and we're so pleased to present you tonight with these awards.
Mr. Shuck?
Good evening, Council. Clay Shuck, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services. Also have with me Veronica Mueller, who is our fitness supervisor. Many of you know Veronica. She's here to join us tonight. We're just really honored to receive these 2 awards. We appreciate it. These are really a testament to the staff and to the job that they do every single day. So thank you very much, and thank you for allowing us this opportunity.
Are there any comments from council? And I should note, I know that we were having an issue with the Channel 8 broadcast. Ms. Gelman, are they working on it?
Yeah, they are working on it. So it sounds like the YouTube channel is working, but we are having trouble with channel 8 tonight.
Okay, well, our apologies. I did want to talk. Go ahead.
I did want to thank our Park and Recs department. You guys have just done a phenomenal job. I'm there all the time. But beyond that, I hear from extra community members that literally will come from other cities and counties to come to our rec centers. I've heard it time and time again. And it's no doubt, you guys are the best. And we have really appreciated how well you treat a lot of people that come in. And even just people in the community as well, in that open space. And I just hear so many great compliments about you guys. And the classes that you offer, the instructors are amazing. And yeah, I just thank you so much.
Any other council comment? Well, I echo what was just been said. Thank you so much for all that you do for our community. And thank you guys for being here from our Broomfield magazine. Congratulations. We will move to public comment next. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on what matters, on matters other than items already listed on this evening's agenda. However, this evening I will also permit individuals to comment on item 11C, the oil and gas update, during this public comment meeting, rather than waiting for the item to come up later in the agenda. Please know that you're permitted to speak only once on an item, whether now or when 11C is discussed. As mentioned earlier, the public may comment both in person or via phone. If you're joining via phone and want to be placed in the queue for comment again, that number is, where's my Chiron? 855-695-3744, and press *3 to be placed in the queue. If you're joining in person, please line up behind the podium, and public comments will be limited to the time outlined earlier. And we'll start with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard, please come line up behind the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record.
Mayor Castriota, council members. This is Chris Hammerschmidt. I'm in Willow Run subdivision. Tonight I'm coming to you and asking you to suspend the mask mandates. As you know, Chancellor Boris Johnson is suspending all mask and vaccine mandates starting tomorrow. We've heard from South Africa that they have passed the Omicron peak and they are trending downward. Our Broomfield data also shows this trend. I have a memo here from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. This memo discusses in detail how the virus was engineered and was then released from the Wuhan lab in August 2019. This memo also discusses how the curatives work and why masks and vaccine mandates don't work. They're ineffective. Well, not that they don't work, that they're ineffective. And this book is a book of epidemic influenza. It talks about infection waves. They come in the fall because we're closed in our homes. They also talk about how the influenza virus has mutated over years, and it talks about how we don't know exactly how people are infected or where the infection comes from. I'm asking you, the City Council, to please read some of this information and read the reports about masking on both sides of the issue. I know there's reports both for and against. And I'm asking that if you choose to reinstate this mask mandate on February 3rd, that you let the citizens of Broomfield know why you came to that conclusion. I'm a scientist. I've been all over the data for the past 2 years. I've done correlations. I've looked at the Broomfield data. I've pulled data off of the main website. I'm asking you to look over the data that is currently on the website, the Colorado data, the data from the national. And I want you to understand what you're talking about. We should not be afraid of COVID anymore. We've got vaccines, we've got curatives, and it is now time to let the people know that it is no longer a threat to society. People do get sick, we all know they get sick, but there's ways that they can help themselves out. I've seen people recover from this, and we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members, honorable mayor. My name is Pam Wanick. I live off 154th and Zuni. That's the North Star Estates neighborhood. You've all been apprised of the situation. And instead of hearing it off the news and hearing it through typing, I want to put my face in front of you to let you know that I'm a human being, that I have families to protect, I have neighbors to protect. I want to talk to you about a little incident that occurred. Well, actually, it wasn't little. To some people, it's little. To me, it wasn't little. On January 14th, Friday afternoon, my dog was barking excessively. She's a little bit nutty and nervous. I figured it was just the gusts from the winds, but we did have gusty winds. I opened the door to let her in. She still's like, no, that isn't it. So I looked up towards the north. I live on 154th. I looked to the north, 156th, and I saw a dark plume of smoke over 100 feet high. Initially, I thought it was my neighbor's barn or the house. I was concerned about the gusty winds. I heard no sirens. I called another neighbor next to me. She has a better visual of that area. She was on a business call. I said, forget that, I'm calling 911. I called 911 and they said, we have an emergency response or something to that effect on the way. She didn't tell me where they were going. Oh, by the way, I told emergency response, I said, by the way, there's fracking wells up there. And so she just said they were on the way. And so I kept looking out my window. By then, the smoke had dissipated. But I also was not seeing any sirens. So the next step was, oh, it's the fracking wells are on fire. So I just have real concerns about that. I have horses, and I'm still pretty jittery about the Marshall fire. And I'm worried about how many, I'm going into evacuation mode. Just because the smoke's out doesn't mean there's no fire or something else is going on. So I've been very concerned about this from the get-go. As an Adams County resident, I kind of feel like the stepchild. I feel like we've been disenfranchised, even though I know a lot of it up there have really helped us out a lot. The fact is today, even though I'm on code red, I've been on code red, both counties for months, actually over a year. Nobody called me to say, hey, Pam, things are okay. Who do I call? How do I deal with that? And I also would like to say that from the get-go, there is still no street evacuation plan. If I load up my horses and I gotta go, can I go up 156? Do I go to Huron? Or am I get blocked off at Zunon? Can I go to 152nd? Where do I go? What do I do? And I'm not getting an answer from my commissioners. I'm not getting an answer from Broomfield. And quite frankly, I can't believe that Colorado Oil and Gas Commission approved a well without specific safety plans. They approved the permit. So I just wanted to not, be a crabby old witch up here, but I just want to let you know that I was terrified. And it was nothing like throwing a slab of bacon on a grill. I'll tell you that. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your service.
Thank you. Anyone else in person that would like to comment? If not, we'll move on to our online attendees. First, we have Kristen Logan.
Hello, Kristen Logan from the Anthem Highlands neighborhood. Like Pam, I witnessed the event that happened this past Friday, and although I'm not there in person, I am glad that I can at least call in and put a personal story to what I experienced. I left early to pick up my kids. Normally, I don't pick them up until well after 5 p.m., but we were leaving to go out of town for the weekend. And as my husband was driving to the school, right before we were about to turn left, he says, oh my God, there's a fire on the oil and gas site. And I looked up and saw a huge billowing smoke plume. And I was like, oh my God, this is awful. My first thought was, what happens if this explodes? For the people that aren't familiar with what happens during the pickup in the drive line at Prospect Ridge Academy, this is a charter school. There's no buses, and it's not a neighborhood school, so there's not a lot of students on foot. There's cars that come from all over Broomfield and Adams County, and they all sit in a long drive line, which often causes a lot of traffic backup on Preble Creek, even on Sheridan as cars are trying to make a right in. And there's just a big traffic jam. So I'm seeing these flames. I called 911 to report a fire at the fracking site because from my vantage point, I could clearly see it was coming from the fracking site. And I sat there taking a quick picture once I got off, wondering and worrying about what happens if this thing explodes and how am I going to get to my kids? How are all of these people going to get out of here? Luckily, it was towards the end of drive line, so the traffic wasn't as bad as it normally was. But I don't feel like these are things that have been thought through or addressed. I was very vocal during the approval process of this project, especially with the comprehensive drilling plan, the risk assessment, the emergency plan, the evacuation plan. And this just reiterates to me, especially after what happened with the Marshall Fire, that we are not prepared. We are not prepared. We are not ready. We have schools with school-aged children standing outside with whatever was being put into the air, with people just staring at this plume. I'm very concerned about the communication around this event. I'm very concerned about the overall communication. It feels like all of the events that are happening are being downplayed. We have benzene spikes well over health guidelines. And again, we're being told, look away. We know that benzene is a carcinogen. We know that benzene is recalled for much lower levels in different industries in different areas, but we're just told to look away. We're told that this was not a fire, but we can see clearly with our own eyes that there was smoke, that there was a flame. Maybe it wasn't a long fire, maybe it didn't spread, but this was not any planned sort of event. This wasn't a planned flare to burn off gas. I just think that this group really needs to work on a few things with this project moving forward. We need to get some organization. We need to revisit some of our safety protocols. I can say from experience, North Metro Fire Department is amazing. They've been to my house a few times to help with some health emergencies with my mother. And they've stayed with us and they've been there through a lot. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I don't have a clock. I can't see in front of me. So I'll wrap it up. But in this case, I'm very disappointed that their response time was less than they would spend with a woman who was having a diabetic sugar shock. This was a fire. This was a big event. I appreciate everyone's time. Thanks for hearing my story, and I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you. Our next caller is Lizzie Lario.
Good evening, Lizzie Lario from the Wildgrass subdivision. Thank you for the opportunity to speak now because I will be running carpool during this agenda item later, so I'm very grateful. I am also calling about the fire at the extraction or Civitas site, and really just to make sure council members and staff understand the resident perspective and the hypocrisy that's happening around the latest issue with Civitas and at their pads. I know they claim to be this new company that's going to be a good neighbor, but their actions speak louder than words, and they can't have it both ways. I understand they wrote an apology, which is definitely new for them, but that does not erase all the other issues around this incident, many of which you heard prior to me speaking. They should have been forthcoming with all of this information from the beginning, and they weren't. They got caught between two stories on a television interview that came about because of the concern of residents. So please, like with everything with this company, proceed with caution. The way they handled this issue was not in a trustworthy or trust-building way, and they have not earned, nor do they deserve to operate like they have built trust. I put this in my email, and I feel very strongly, so I'm going to repeat it. If we didn't have council members asking difficult, deep, and thoughtful questions, and residents on the constant lookout, how different does this entire incident look without these two pieces? Again, Civitas got caught between two stories on TV. Would Broomfield have the full timeline and story otherwise? I really hope these are questions that both council and staff are thinking about because they're very important. And I think the protocol of handling these events, looking at how everything happened, and handling them in the future and improving upon it is very important. With the Marshall Fire fresh in all of our minds, and really even without that factor, I know, I'm very grateful for North Metro. As the previous caller indicated, they're fantastic. But should they be investigating these oil and gas incidents more thoroughly versus accepting what the operator says? Not saying they didn't investigate it, I'm just saying at a deeper level and more thoroughly. If you're not familiar with these pads, they have bone dry hay bales all around them, so close to homes. I understand, I'm almost out of time. Okay, I understand Broomfield has stated they can't use the code red. I understand this. How will we communicate future events to residents? And what about Adams County? They had no idea what was going on. And lastly, if there's any way to get information about the trigger canisters and why no canisters were triggered, it's very misleading to just say no canisters were triggered without explaining why. So if we could please get that to the public. Thank you so very much. I appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Kathy Swan Bogart.
Hi, I'm calling about the fire that occurred on January 14th and the big black cloud of smoke. So I did read the root cause analysis, and one of the things I am very concerned about, in addition to all the comments that people are bringing up tonight, is that this company concluded that there was no safety risk to the community. And I'm not quite sure that's quite accurate. We didn't blow up, but that was kind of a huge black cloud, and I have to assume that you've seen the photo that kind of shows how enormous it was. So, and I also think that if this happened to someone like Governor Polis and he was out walking his children and they had to walk through that plume, that no oil and gas company would conclude that there was no safety risk to the community. So I don't think Broomfield should accept that response, and they need to make this company dig deeper. The other thing that was also kind of brought up in the root cause analysis is they kept calling this a liquid. It's not really a liquid, it's crude oil that went up. That's what made all that black smoke when it came out of the ECD. And I don't think it's particularly healthy for people to be smelling that much crude oil in the air. I'm not quite sure why this company was so nervous about just identifying it as crude oil rather than just using the term liquid, but they apparently don't want to let anyone know that they were putting crude oil up in the air. The other thing is they identified this as a flash rather than a fire, and so did Broomfield. If you watch the video, there's a fire there. There's that giant flicker, and it's moving about, appears to be creating its own wind, appears to be rather huge. So I need some clarification on this root cause analysis. I think this is a technical point, and it has to do with the temperature of the ECD and whether or not they're staying less than the fire point, just at the flash point or above the flash point, not exceeding or hitting the fire point where a sustained fire would occur. But that needs to come out. If this was something that affected Polis, I'm pretty sure they would identify why they're calling this a flash rather than a fire, because I don't think there's any human being that would look at that videotape and say, yep, that wasn't a fire. And it looked like it was on the ground. And the grasses and everything that's combustible from the Marshall fire, the situation and why we're concerned about that. And I also wanted to find out and clarify if all the floats are going to be replaced on all the other pieces of equipment. This equipment is going to be there for as long as they're doing this. So I don't know if that's 30 years or longer, but it seems like, did they put insufficient floats out there to save a buck, or what happened with the situation with the floats? Is this marginal equipment or something that's kind of sketchy that they're putting out in this residential fracking? And does that need to have a larger look at?
Can you please wrap up?
And is there other equipment? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I say, can you please wrap up your comments?
Yes.
Okay.
So is there other marginal equipment or sketchy equipment that needs, because this is residential fracking and not 10 miles from people, that needs to be evaluated other than just this float? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other callers and none online, so we'll move on. Council's community and event updates are next. Does any member of council have an update this evening? Councilmember Shea.
Thank you, Mary. So I just kind of following up on some of these comments. There was a great LTE about the Marshall Fire and Broomfield's emergency preparedness. I invite all my council colleagues to read it. It's very good. It's by one of our board and commissions members. I also wanted to update council. The Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport Community Noise Roundtable was canceled in January due to two of our member municipalities were dealing with the Marshall Fire. So we will be meeting in February. We're going to be talking about dues, facilitation of our meetings, as well as ingress, egress, consultant conversations. Those are three big conversations. All of them have impacts on one another. So I'll keep you apprised as that comes back. I did attend a sustainability film series. This is a partnership with the Superior, Lafayette, Louisville, and Broomfield. I attended the virtual film and discussion on January 20th with the film The Great Divide about Colorado's water heritage and the challenges ahead. The next film and final film will be on February 17th. You can still register for that film. It's called 2040, and the Zoom conversation that will follow, and you can register for that at superiorcolorado.gov. And the other thing that I wanted to update council on, it was something very cool. It was in the Broomfield Leader. So if you haven't read the Broomfield Leader, this is new online media here in Broomfield. There was an article about an opera singer that's learning to conduct. And for me, anytime I see that opera, I'm a past opera singer, I start to read those articles. So I read this one. And the opera singer is no other than Michelle Young, who is an international opera singer. She's a mezzo-soprano singer. She's sung all over the world. And it just so happens that she's also a Broomfield resident. Early on in the pandemic, she connected with a former colleague of mine, who's a conductor at Central City Opera, and started to take conducting lessons. She found that she really enjoyed conducting and wanted to pursue it further. She formed a nonprofit called Ensemble Charité, and it provides symphony professionals and another opportunity to perform, but also students an opportunity to hone their skills. And the reason I tell you all this is because that ensemble's first concert will be in Broomfield at the Broomfield Auditorium on March 23rd. And this is the cool part, is it's going to be a benefit concert for Valswan Children's Center. So kind of a cool thing. Not only is this going to be a kind of a new venture, but also it's going to be supporting one of our long-term nonprofits here. And I say that, the world has been on a wild ride for these last 2 years. Many people have felt negative effects in one way or another. And at the same time, there have been positive things that are happening. And this is kind of one of those positive things that's come out of this pandemic. The performing arts have been hit big time during the pandemic. So I hope you'll all join Michelle Young, the Ensemble Charité, on March 23rd at the Broomfield Auditorium for their premiere concert and support Valswan's Children's Center. Thanks, Mayor. That's all I have.
Well, thank you for that update, Councilmember Schaaf. We'll now go remotely to Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to let council and the community know that there is a neighborhood meeting being held tomorrow night for a proposed gas station at the southwest corner of Midway and Lowell. It's a virtual meeting at 6 p.m. via Zoom. I have the invite from the developer, but I'm sure the city staff has that also if we want to if anybody needs it. And then I also want to take this opportunity to thank our public health department for the amazing work they've done during this unprecedented pandemic, since we don't have a public health update tonight. We've all been touched by the pandemic at this point. I know my father passed away from it, and I'm in quarantine tonight because my mother-in-law is in chemo. And I just want to thank the work they've done, and say that I fully support them and the public health orders that we put in place. And I wanted to take that opportunity. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member updates? All right, then. Council's consideration of the consent agenda is next. The clerk will read all of the consent agenda items by title, and there will be one opportunity for public comments and council questions. Council will then be asked to approve the consent agenda with two separate motions, as item 7G is a request for an executive session and requires an individual motion. Following the clerk's reading of consent agenda items 7A through 7G, We will ask for public comment. Will the clerk please read agenda items 7A through 7G by title?
7A, approval of minutes from January 11th, 2022, regular meeting. 7B, resolution number 2022-04, authorizing the cancellation of the bad debt submitted by the revenue manager as uncollectible. 7C, resolution number 2022-16, authorizing and approving an agreement by and between the city and county of Broomfield and RME Ltd. LLC, doing business as Elite Service Infrastructure for the Badlands Lane reconstruction. 7D, resolution number 2022-15, authorizing and approving an agreement by and between the city and county of Broomfield and the ECI Construction Inc. for the Anthem Community Park Phase 3A project. 7E, resolution number 2022-20, authorizing changes to the Enhanced Broomfield Business Improvement Program. 7F, resolution number 2022-02, approving the separation of Northwest Parkway rights of way from existing election precinct and renumbering all precincts in response to census-driven congressional redistricting. 7G, request for executive session to direct negotiators concerning business initiatives for 2 business development projects looking to locate in Broomfield, projects Felix and Windward.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comment. Does any member of the public have comments on these agenda items? If so, step up to the podium. Not seeing any. Does any member of council have comments on these agenda items? Councilmember Lim.
Yes, on 7D, the resolution for authorizing the construction for Anthem Community Park Phase 3A. There were some revisions to Phase 3A that I did not feel were clearly reflected in the memo. The revisions were made in March of 2021, and I was wondering if staff could clarify what is in Phase 3A that we are approving the funds for, perhaps by showing the map or something.
Sure. So I actually will ask Katie Allen, our city and county engineer, to join us at the podium, and we also have Parks and Rec Director Clay Shuck. Hi, good evening, Katie Allen, city and county engineer. 2 things on 3A. So in the memo itself, there's a link in the 4th bullet to the construction ready plans. 3A is shown on sheet 4. So in there, and I can show it. Are we allowed to use this still, or do I need to call the presentation?
There's no camera there.
Yeah, I can bring it up.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you want the page 2 map, Katie?
Page 3, please.
Let me know if this is not the right.
Perfect. Yeah, that's it. So if you can see the black line surrounding Phase 3A, 3B is shown is just slightly faded a little bit. So 3B you're not building, and that includes the ball fields and some of the improvements furthest to the east. Phase 3A includes the west half as well as the parking lot on the south. Just to note it, in the council memo, we did get higher bids than we were hoping for, which is pretty consistent with this whole year. Construction inflation, so we will not be constructing the pedestrian bridge over the Franco Canal at this time, nor the playground. We will be setting those aside and working with finance to get those elementary budgeted and installed as soon as we can. I hope that answers your question, Councilmember Lynn.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And then as marked, we would have at another time, Phase 3B would be brought before council before any construction plans went forward.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments on the consent agenda? Is there a motion that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for agenda items 7A through 7F be approved? Councilmember Ward? Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Hinkle? Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Council members Marshallson and Councilmember Lindstedt are joining us virtually. Therefore, we'll use roll call vote this evening. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jezerski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindstedt,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Next is council's consideration of consent agenda item 7G, a request for an executive session. Will the city and county attorney please read that motion?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. That an executive session be held on February 8th, 2022 at 5:15 PM for the purpose of providing advice and direction to negotiators regarding two business development projects, Project Felix and Windward, as permitted by CRS 24-6-4024E.
Thank you. Is there a motion, Councilmember Leslie? And is there a second? Councilmember Cohen?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? As a reminder, requests for executive session require an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the quorum present. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle, yes, Jezerski, Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindstedt,
Yes.
Marsh Holston,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. There is no business before the Board of Social Services or Board of Health this evening. The first item under council business this evening is the public hearing and council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-03, approving a local historic landmark designation of a property located at 140 Agate Way in the Broomfield Heights subdivision. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We'll follow the city's standard public hearing procedures. First, staff will present a summary of the proposal, and then we'll have the applicant's presentation, if applicable. Then we'll ask for public comments, and finally comments from the applicant and questions from City Council. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before I introduce the amazing Anna Bertanzetti, I did want to remind anybody that's listening or who needs to be able to listen, we're still working on channel 8. I just got an update, it's still down. However, we did put a link to the YouTube channel that you can go to listen to tonight's meeting on broomfield.org right at the top. So if you go to broomfield.org, you can just click the YouTube link right at the top. So thanks for indulging me on that. And again, our apologies for the technical difficulty. Now we'll turn it over to Anna Bertanzetti, our Director of Planning.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Anna Bertanzetti, Planning Director. The owners at 140 Agate Way have requested historic landmark designation for their home. The home is on the east side of the street between 1st and 2nd Avenue in the First Filing neighborhood. If approved, this historic landmark designation would be the first privately owned residence designated in the city and county of Broomfield. The designation, if it's approved, would provide some guidelines for the appropriate future use of this land, and it would also guide any decisions regarding moving, demolition, reconstruction, restoration, or alteration of the dwelling unit. It would also make certain tax credits available to this private property owner and could make some other potential benefits or incentives available for the future preservation of this residence. The designation impacts this single home. It does not have any impact on the surrounding neighborhood, except for kind of the singular impact would be that this particular home would be protected in terms of its architectural integrity, and it would be protected from future modifications, since future modifications would need to be reviewed by the Historic Landmark Board. So we could have the next, actually, if we could skip to the second slide, one more. Thank you. According to the Brookfield Municipal Code, properties being considered for landmark designation have to possess architectural, social, or geographic environmental importance to Brookfield. Has to meet one of the criteria listed specifically in the code. In this particular instance, the property is meeting the following two criteria. One, that it exemplifies elements of an architectural style or period. And the second is that it represents a style particularly associated with an area of Brookfield. If this property were to be approved for landmark designation, the following particular features for this home would be included in the resolution as being protected from future modification. These would be the L-shaped footprint of the residence, the red brick veneer, the single-story height, the low sloped hipped roof, the original bay window that's in the front of the home, the location and size of the windows throughout the home, and the location of the front door and this attached single-car garage. Next slide, please. For the Brookfield Municipal Code, if this is designated as a landmark, the property is then subject to the requirements that includes maintaining the building, which encompasses the exterior walls, the roof, the chimney, the foundation, windows, doors, exterior paint, and the landscaping. Additionally, the owner will be required to obtain a certificate of appropriateness prior to any exterior work on the home. This would include, except for simple maintenance that could be done without a prior approval. The Historic Landmark Board would review each of those requests for a certificate of appropriateness for that exterior work, and it would be reviewed during a public hearing. Next slide, please. So these are some of the photos of the home. The west elevation, which is the front, and the northeast and southeast. In compliance with the additional application requirements, the applicants have provided some detailed justification addressing how the nomination meets the criteria of the code and a description of the characteristics of the property to be listed in the current photos of the property from all elevations and perspective. And those are linked in the memorandum. Next slide, please. The Historic Landmark Board heard this request for the nomination during their November meeting. And Historic Landmark Board voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of this nomination. Historic Landmark members Alexander and Michelle Pearson abstained from the vote since they are the applicants this evening. Notice of a hearing requirements have been met, and the applicants have posted a sign on the property, mailed notices to property owners within 250 feet of the site, published notice in the Brookfield Enterprise as well. This concludes staff's presentation on the nomination request, and the applicant is also here this evening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bertzetti. Next is the applicant presentation. Just as we ask our staff to keep their presentations brief, I ask the applicant to be concise in their presentation. Will you please identify yourself for the record prior to beginning your brief presentation?
Laura Israelson, I'm here on behalf of the applicants, and I'm grateful to be here with the City Council and the Mayor. Thank you. The owners of 140th Agate Way, Broomfield, Colorado, are pleased to bring forward the historic landmark nomination for consideration by the members of the City Council. The home is an excellent example of mid-century modern architecture in post-World War II Broomfield. It represents the earliest examples of a planned community in the city and county of Broomfield. It's one of 6 plans in the first filing development. The home is the original structure with one covered porch in the back that is not visible from the front of the home. The house meets the original first filing construction guidelines established in the 1950s, which asked that homes be constructed mostly of brick, include certain elevations and features, and be set back from the sidewalk in the front half of the property. The intent of this landmark nomination by the owners is to recognize both the cultural and architectural importance of mid-century modern homes in first filing. As historic preservationists, they understand the educational value of landmarking a property and also recognize the fiscal benefits for those who choose to restore their home using state tax credits. These state tax credits are available to homeowners with guidance through the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation at History Colorado. Most importantly, they understand that landmarking a home can honor and preserve the history of a historic home and contribute to the understanding of the history and of the growth of Broomfield, especially during the post-World War II era. Finally, the homeowners also recognize that landmarking a building is a thoughtful process that takes cooperation from many entities, and in this case, review by the Historic Landmark Board, input from the community, and approval from the City Council. It also helps the City and County of Broomfield meet some of the requirements of the State and National Certified Local Government Program, which supports historic preservation initiatives across both our state and others. The Pearson family is proud to be part of Broomfield, and they're committed to honoring the history of our city and county. They ask for your support in approving this landmark as brought forward today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed with public comments. Does any member of the public have comments on this agenda item? If so, please line up at the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. We do have somebody online, so I'm going to go to the caller then. Patrick Ivan, I hope I said that right. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Eidman. I'm the Chief Preservation Officer for History Colorado. Also serve as the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer for the state Colorado. So I'd like to thank you first for your time this evening. Just briefly give you some information about our office. Specifically, the State Historic Preservation Office administers the National Historic Preservation Program at the state level by, among other things, reviewing National Register of Historic Places nominations, maintaining data on historic properties across the state, consulting with federal agencies during Section 106 review. Additionally, we manage other programs, including the State Historical Fund Grants Program, federal and state rehabilitation tax credits, oversee the survey and inventory of cultural resources across the state, and our Office of the State Archaeologist provides guidance relating to the identification, documentation, and protection of archaeological resources. I'm calling tonight in strong support of the local landmark designation of 140 Agate Way, and additionally would like to commend both the property owners and the Historic Landmark Board for recognizing the significance of this mid-century architecture in Broomfield, and for recognizing the power and benefits of historic preservation. Because this would be the first local residential landmark in Broomfield, just wanted to share briefly, and the applicant's rep mentioned it, that locally designated properties designated by certified local governments, of which Broomfield is a CLG, are eligible for significant tax credits. In the residential program, it's between 20 and 35% of qualified expenses. Before I wrap up tonight, just would encourage City of Broomfield first to approve this designation tonight, but also to take advantage of our grant programs, either through the Certified Local Government Program or the State Historical Fund, to complete additional survey work and designation, both for residential, commercial, and institutional architecture. Please know History Colorado, our staff are available as a resource as you move forward. And lastly, again, we are just very excited to see this property being considered for designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from City Council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Jenderski.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is an exciting application, I guess. It's the first time I've seen one in 6+ years that I've been on the city council. So this is a fun one, and happy to see it. And you know, I think it's, in my opinion, just the criteria that was set in front of us. It only looks like it has the architectural style and features of a first filing home. So the question that I have is really, I was wondering, I'm not super familiar with that neighborhood. I've been through there a few times, and bike rides and walks, but I'm just wondering, how unique is this home? You know, are there other homes that, I mean, it looks like a first filing home, but I'm just wondering how unique it is, and are there other homes that have, you know, I guess the original architectural features that this home has? Or is this a unicorn, or is it something that survived over the last 60 years, 70 years, or are there a lot of those out there? Or do you even know that?
Councilmember, there's kind of a few layers there, if I can take a shot at answering your question. I don't think it's a unicorn. I think that we have a number of homes in First Island that would meet requirements if the property owners were interested in seeking designation. Broomfield's requirement is that the property owner does have to bring forward the request. They have to be approving of the designation. We haven't done a recent survey, historic survey of that neighborhood to determine how many homes could potentially meet that requirement, since if modifications have been made, they would not have that same architectural integrity that this particular home has. But we believe that there would be many more homes that could potentially meet the criteria. It's hard to say whether those property owners would be interested, and without a survey, hard to put a real number on it.
Well, I do appreciate it. I was just kind of wondering, as I support this, I think either way, I'm just kind of curious as to whether this is something that's, how important it was to protect this. But I think it is, particularly since this homeowner recognizes the value of this protection, and other homeowners, as you mentioned, may not recognize it. So it's a good opportunity to protect this history in our community. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And before I move on, I just want to let everybody know that the Channel 8 broadcast is back up and running. So you Channel 8 watchers, you can tune in. Councilmember Lindley.
Thank you, Mayor. I was pleased to have the gentleman from History, Colorado, to speak to us. Cheryl and I visited that museum yesterday for the first time, and very impressed. They are doing amazing work all over the state. And I would encourage everybody to go down and spend a couple hours there. It was wonderful. I have a similar kind of outlook that Mayor Pro Tem has, in terms of if other members of that neighborhood apply, will we be obligated? I want to put it that way. Would we be obligated to approve them also, because this house potentially is approved for this designation? And then what would be the impact on our budget if there's going to be some helpful tax incentives for the owners? And I have no problem with that. I'm just concerned about the long-term effect if everybody in that neighborhood decided to go this way. Thank you.
Councilmember, so the designations have been available for quite some time. We actually have a few designations that Broomfield has sponsored. But this is the first, like we said, for residential property. So I'm not sure how many additional property owners are interested. But you're right, if additional property owners are interested, they have to go through the same process. And each one would be evaluated individually. Does it still have the architectural integrity? What elements are there that are particular for preservation? And the Historic Landmark Board would be really charged with taking a look at those applications first and seeing whether they have a recommendation. So each one would be an individual evaluation as they come through.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Hancock.
Sorry, everyone. I had my notes in my phone. So thank you, Mayor. This is exciting and also new, and I've never seen one come before council before. I had the same questions as my fellow council members had, and also I did know, that the owners do have to keep it up and keep up the architecture and the aesthetics. I have two questions on that one, like who would provide oversight to ensure that it's kept up, and how often would that happen?
Councilmember, so we do have only a few historic properties within Linfield, so that's a great thing in terms of keeping an eye on things. We'll work closely with our code compliance division. Our Historic Landmark Board will be charged with reviewing any of the updates or renovations if it were to be proposed in the future, and to verify and make sure that we catch that this is required before a permit is issued. We'll have some protections within the permitting process to make sure that it pops up and alerts anyone who tries to issue a permit for the property to make sure that they have the proper authorization from the Historic Landmark Board before they do so.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then what happens, I need to open my notes again, but I can't do it because it has Face ID and I have my mask on. What happens when there's like a sale that happens, and then since this is a private property, it's much different than what I think I've seen before. What happens at that sale? Does it pass on to the next person, and then And then are there any additional things that the homeowners have to do, and what does that look like?
So the designation would follow the property. If a future property owner, or even if this property owner had a concern with the designation, they would have to go through, there's a process outlined in code to change the designation back, to remove the landmarking. And it's a public hearing process. It is a significant process to go through if someone in the future were to try to go through that.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Shea.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, and you kind of answered, maybe just answered this, but I just want to clarify. So with any improvements or changes to this property, the property owners, the applicant, would just need to interact with staff and the historic landmark board. Would this property owner or owner need to come before council ever again?
I don't believe so, Councilmember Schaaf. I believe everything would be able to be handled if they were to make a modification to the structure and needed that certificate of appropriateness. That would be handled just through the historic landmark board, and it wouldn't require any further action from the city council unless, as was just mentioned by Councilmember Hinkle, there was a request to change the designation or demolish the structure or something to that degree. Then I believe the code requires it to come back to city council.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Councilmember Cullen?
Thank you. I just had wanted to clarify the public interest in this and to say up front, my first two homes were built in 1941 and 1908. So I have an appreciation of older homes, of love and hate relationship. But my understanding is the point of the tax credits is to encourage people to maintain a historically or architecturally significant home and maintain it in the same character, right? That's the public purpose.
That is exactly the public purpose, Councilmember Cohen.
So going back to, I did drive through the neighborhood. There are, as I think this is one of 6 models, and there are several other homes on the same block with the same design. So I'm having trouble figuring out the distinctiveness and what would happen if someone else mentioned that everybody on the block, or everybody who had this type of home, got this tax break or this designation. I'm not sure if that's what the purpose of the designation was, to be that broadly applied.
So if multiple properties in a singular area were designated, it would help to protect the character of that particular, in that case, a street or a neighborhood, a larger designated area, if all those property owners were interested in such a designation for each of their properties. We do have what we call the neighborhood plan and an overlay that does add some additional protections for the first filing neighborhood to make sure that as additions occur, they have some requirements for additional masonry, for example, even if it's an accessory structure. But there's many homes in the area that have had additions made or added garages or garage space, changed windows. Those types of things change the architectural character. And this particular home wouldn't be able to do those types of things. They would have to maintain the home in its current state, in its current architectural elements. Whereas other homes would be able to, but then not be able to have those same tax credit benefits.
And does this have any impact on neighbors, any restrictions on the person next door willing to scrape the block, and build something 2 stories?
It does not. This particular designation is not a neighborhood designation. It is simply for this singular property. So the impact for any adjacent property is only that this property is protected. It doesn't have any impact on our neighbor being able to make modifications.
I guess the only problem I'm having, I'm trying to see is a landmark status to a home that has many duplicates. And you can drive that neighborhood and see many versions of the same thing. What's the public interest to provide tax credits? It doesn't strike me as landmark, I guess is what I'm saying.
In this particular instance, I think the Historic Landmark Board is looking at the fact that this would be a protection in the future. So currently, as Mayor Pro Tem pointed out, there could be other properties that are currently eligible, but over time, there's going to be additional modifications to those structures and additional pressure to modify and modernize them. which would change their architectural character. In this particular instance, we're saying there are multiple structures that are eligible, but this particular structure will stay as an example of the architecture that was put into place in first filing when it was first developed. And other properties could change over time, but this particular property will be kept and preserved so that that's ensured moving forward.
Perhaps my objection is only 10 years old than I am. Last question, does this only affect the exterior, right? The interior could be totally gutted and remodeled.
That is correct. The windows are protected in this case, so that does change some of that interior changes, but yes, they could modernize the kitchen or things like that inside. That is not part of this protection.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim. Yes, I just wanted to put this in its proximity to the context of the Broomfield Town Square. So could you, I know there were some, certainly at least I was aware of some rumors in the neighborhood that neighbors in that first filing area, both in Ward 2 and Ward 3, were uncomfortable with Broomfield Town Square and how it might eventually encroach into first filing. So I guess I just wanted staff to comment on there is a value in this historic preservation of this house, and that it is not solely an effort, I guess, to prevent encroachment of Broomfield Town Square. If someone could comment on that.
And certainly the, if I may, Councilmember Bloom, the applicant's representative could talk about what really brought them forward at this time to seek the designation. But I can answer in terms of where there wouldn't be an impact on the proposal that's moving forward. This is not across Main Street, but the next block over and Agate. So there isn't an impact on Broomfield Town Square. And if there are additional property owners on Main or on Agate or other properties, they could similarly seek designation for their property if that was something they were interested in. There are, as I mentioned, the neighborhood overlay zoning requirements that already protect some of the architectural requirements, or put a few additional safeguards on trying to keep the neighborhood most similar to the way it is, even with additions as they're brought forward. And so I think there are a few layers to help protect the first filing neighborhood from any of those additional pressures. But if there were a change to further densify or make significant changes to the first filing neighborhood, that would require changes that would be something outside of an administrative change and would require public hearings through the city council.
Thank you for providing that context.
Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have two quick questions. Just for all of my colleagues and for any of the public watching, could you clarify what those additional protections are in the first filing overlay? You know, for example, could someone scrape a home?
Councilmember, I will look that up in just a moment if I can have just a minute to bring this up.
Okay, because my understanding was that you couldn't, but I wasn't sure what the clarifications were. I think first filing is a pretty unique overlay rules. And then I guess my second question is actually about ADUs and how this designation could impact someone applying for an ADU at that residence in the future. Is there a process or something to make sure that ADU, you know, doesn't conflict with the general style of the neighborhood, but to allow that in the future, or would it just be an impossibility if this is passed?
Councilmember Lindstedt, it's something I hadn't put a lot of thought about in terms of the specific requirement for an ADU, but the landmark designation is for the land as well as the structure. So if someone were to add an accessory structure like an ADU, it would require that certificate of appropriateness through the landmark board, and they have to look at the details of that proposal to determine whether it is consistent with the architectural integrity. I'm having a hard time imagining how that could be met, but really without having a specific proposal, I'd hate to say it's impossible.
I guess, yeah, my thoughts are, I think, first filing is our first planned community in Broomfield. It's our oldest neighborhood, and it's really, really important that we appreciate that character. So I don't know. I think maybe I fully support this, but I think maybe in the future we should think about how our designations like this could affect the ADUs and needed adjustments that could occur, and especially in older neighborhoods with large lots. So I don't know, just something to chew on for my colleagues, but I do support this one tonight. Being from this area, I know a lot of these houses would not meet these specifics. So I think it's a good thing, but yeah, I just think maybe we need to put a little thought into how we can make all of our priorities work together in the future. Thank you for that answers.
Mayor, if I could get back to the original question. That would be
Absolutely.
So section 1725 in the municipal code is where we go through the neighborhood overlay requirements. So there are requirements associated with building height, the height for accessory structures. And again, this is not for landmark structures. This is for any home in the first filing neighborhood. The roof framing, the shape has to be hip, gable, very specific, no flat roofs, for example. Building materials, as I mentioned, there has to be some specific masonry requirements met, as well as there's some additional requirements related to landscaping, specifically to protect the fact that there are a lot of mature trees and what happens if a mature tree is impacted by the residential. I do not see anything, getting back to your specific question about whether a home could be fully scraped and rebuilt. I don't see anything specific that prohibits someone from fully removing a structure, except for the fact that when it was to be rebuilt, it would have to meet all of these same criteria. So a rebuilt structure would have to be of the same scale, of the same materials. It couldn't be a gigantic house outside of the characteristic of the rest of the neighborhood. It needs to fit all of these same criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blanchetti. Would you like to add anything?
There was a question about this family's motivation for this property. This family has spent the better part of their life in preservation, and they bought this property to keep their family in Broomfield because they love Broomfield. They love preserving Broomfield. They work with the Grange and work with students, help to start the World War II Veterans Museum with students. And I have followed them and what they do with historic preservation, and this comes from their heart. And they will do right by this. And they understand the code, they understand what needs to be done, and they are very motivated to preserve and to make sure that we have this. So this is an example of Broomfield's greatest generation, right? They came home from World War II and built these homes. And I actually think that this walkability of Broomfield that we're moving into, to have these landmark designations, to have places that people can walk to and see and go from the first filing into the Veterans Museum, this strengthens the community of Broomfield. And of all the families I know, that is their motivation. They just want to make sure that Broomfield is a better place and that we preserve the history and the culture of what has happened in Broomfield.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. How many years has code allowed for residents to apply for historic landmark?
Thank you, Councilmember. I have a quick ask Judy Hammer. She is the staff liaison for the Historic Landmark Board. And she says that this has been in place since 2005.
Okay. And what year did the current applicants acquire the property?
2004, thank you.
No, 2018.
2018, Councilmember Ward.
And then my third question was actually taken care of by the applicant representative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other council questions? I think we've got everybody. This is exciting. There being no further comments, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-03. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-03 by title?
Resolution number 2022-03 approving local historic landmark designation of Greenville Heights, filing number 1 and amended lot 6, block 21, 140 at Gateway.
Is there a motion? Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that resolution number 2022-3 be adopted.
Is there a second? Mayor Pro Tem Jezierski?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't see your hand.
That's right. Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to comment, I've got to know Michelle Pearson over the years, and your involvement in historic preservation has been something that has been core to my knowledge of you. And your desire and willingness to move forward with a historic landmark is pretty remarkable. This application says a lot to me, but it says lead by example. Your involvement in historic land preservation and saying, I'm going to put my own property to that test and ensure that, adhering to all of those standards that are required within that process. So thank you for bringing this thoughtful application forward. Because of your experience and knowledge level of the applicant, I'm curious how this process was for you. And this, of course, can be a separate conversation, but I'd like to hear more about how, if this process was arduous for you, how open and available this is to other residents that don't have your same level of expertise with historic preservation. But I thank you for bringing this application forward, and I look forward to supporting it tonight.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, then. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Hinkle,
Yes.
Jezierski,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindstedt,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Congratulations. All right, we're going to move on now. Our next order of business. I can let you all celebrate a little bit out.
Sorry.
Okay.
The landmark board's here. We're all happy.
I know. We're excited too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Our next order of business on the agenda is a public hearing and council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-10, approving the Knudsen subdivision filing number 1, lot 3, site development plan. I'll now declare the public hearing open. We will follow the city standard public hearing procedures as previously outlined. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and I just want to acknowledge what a fantastic job that Anna Brittonzetti does, her and her team. I see Brandon and I know Judy was here, so thank you. So Anna, back to you, sister.
Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem City Council. Anna Brittonzetti, Planning Director. We can have the next slide, please. The application this evening is for a warehouse and distribution center at 10355 West 120th Avenue. This project is generally north of 120th Avenue and it's south of Interlochen Loop. There's some other light industrial and employment areas to the east and west of this site, and Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Area Airport is directly to the south. To the north, across Interlochen Loop is in the Interlochen development as well. Next slide, please. The property is zoned PUD and it's governed by the Knudsen, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, I apologize. Subdivision filing number 1 PUD plan. The PUD plan allows for various commercial and industrial uses. And the proposed distribution warehouse facility that's proposed this evening is fully in compliance with that PUD plan in terms of the use. The comprehensive plan and long-range financial plan have assumed property designation of commercial for this property. And again, the proposal is in compliance with that designation. Next slide, please. The property this evening is 7.91 acres in size, and they are proposing a single 47,377 square foot warehouse distribution facility. The building is proposed to be about 28 feet in height, which is below the maximum height allowed in this area of 55 feet, excuse me. And the facility, as I mentioned, is adjacent to Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. The airport has reviewed this proposal and had no concerns with the building height. There are overhead roll-up doors on both the eastern and western facades to accommodate loading and unloading of trucks and movement and storage of the packages. There are 2 ingress-egress points along West 120th Avenue. There's no direct access to Interlock and Loop to the north. The majority of the applicant's landscape materials are along the perimeter of the parking and drive aisles to provide landscape softened street frontages. These include mix of deciduous and evergreen trees and shrubs. There are existing segments of sidewalk along portions of West 120th Avenue and Interlock and Loop. And the developer this evening would be extending an 8-foot sidewalk along their property frontage on West 120th Avenue, as well as extending the 8-foot pedestrian path along the northern property line adjacent to Interlock and Loop as well. Next slide, please. The applicant's facility is proposed to be constructed of CMU, concrete masonry unit, and it's in tan and brown shades, pretty similar to the tenant's corporate colors for UPS. And the roll-up doors are proposed to be white. Next slide, please. There is one variance being requested as part of this application. This variance seeks an increase in allowable parking and drive coverage for the site. The PUD establishes a maximum of 35% coverage, and the applicant is proposing a 40% coverage for parking and drives. The applicant has noted that this increase in coverage for this use is necessary to accommodate the enhanced drive aisle and parking areas needed for the commercial vehicles. So in this case, the trucks and trailers and delivery vans. An online concept review was held previously, and a neighborhood meeting was also held for this project. And on December 13th, 2021, Land Use Review Commission held a hearing on this proposed development and voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval with no conditions. There are no key issues identified by staff, and the applicant is joining us virtually this evening.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Bergzetti. Next is the applicant presentation. Just as we ask our staff to keep their presentations brief, I ask the applicant to be concise in their presentation. Will the applicant's representative please identify themselves for the record prior to beginning your brief presentation this evening?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff, and citizens. My name is Sydney Goodman. I am the UPS project engineer assigned to this project. Also in attendance tonight is Sergio Enriquez, the UPS project manager. Next slide, please. Here is our project site overview. To reiterate, this site will have 2 entrances from 120th Avenue. It will be about 50,000 square feet. It is just under 8 acres of land and will be about 30 feet high and will be made of masonry. Next slide, please. This property is desired for UPS because we are here to provide any service imaginable with a package. Unlike USPS, we do deliver globally. Our project is to improve delivery and pickup times to the zip codes listed here, which is also depicted in the yellow shaded section. The red is the area delivered from Boulder, and the blue is from Commerce City. The yellow area is currently split vertically down the center, where left is currently delivered from Boulder and the right is currently delivered from Commerce City. Next slide, please. With constructing this facility, services will be improved. As I stated before, drivers are currently commuting daily from Boulder and Commerce City to those areas in Broomfield and surrounding communities. We are currently over capacity on the amount of package cars delivering to Broomfield from Commerce City and Boulder. We are also over capacity on the amount of packages flowing through these surrounding facilities. I am sure that you are all been witnessing later and later delivery and pickup times since prior to the pandemic, and this is only going to get worse without this new facility due to increase of online purchasing. This facility will provide relief to the surrounding centers and will create a better overall experience with receiving packages in a timely fashion. We will be constructing a customer counter at this site, which will create a more convenient pickup location rather than driving to Boulder or Commerce City if you are not home for delivery. Next slide, please. This facility will bring over 100 jobs to the community. We will be offering 50 to 60 driver positions, 60 to 70 part-time positions, about 3 management level positions, and a few other support staff positions such as mechanics. The part-time positions will be ranging from $30,000 to $40,000, with full-time positions ranging from $75,000 to $120,000. Next slide, please. With opening this facility, employees will be relocating to be closer to work, which will bring the housing market up. Employees will be purchasing from local grocers and other industries in which profits will rise. Our site itself will also be bringing in more work for support services such as landscaping, maintenance, and day-to-day utility consumption. There are plenty of benefits with bringing UPS into the community. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments. Does any member of the public have comments on this agenda item? We'll start with in person. All right, I'm not seeing any on the phone. So let's move on to questions from council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion, and the time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against are later. Are there any questions? Councilmember Shah?
Thank you, Mayor. So I believe that the council member said that this was our first project that's come forward with the kind of revamped development review process. So this was one in which had the online concept, whereas it didn't have a concept review happen in a meeting. And I was curious from staff as well as the applicant, how the experience went with this. Did the applicant get the information that they needed from kind of the concept review process? Would the applicant have preferred to do to hold the concept review in a meeting as opposed to online?
Councilmember Schaaf, I will defer to the applicant to respond specifically. From staff's perspective, this was one of the first in 2020, and we didn't get a lot of engagement. There were, I don't remember any comments for this particular project. That is not the case more recently. More recently, I think the concept reviews, we are getting the comments back specifically from council members as well as from the Land Use Commission and members of the public. And so we are seeing additional engagement that was not in place in September, I believe, of 2020 when this first happened. So it has been kind of a growing process and changing and improving. And I think some of that is our engagement, including it in the Friday emails, the email reminders. And so hopefully that's all helping to improve engagement. But I defer to the applicant in terms of their how they perceive the process.
Would the applicant like to do something? I can't see you. Go ahead.
Of course. So this is my first project, so I have nothing to really go off of. I did like the correspondence between us and the city. We're very quick with this. I don't know if Sergio has more to say though.
Good evening. This is Sergio Enriquez, UPS project manager. Again, Mayor and Council, thank you for your time. And my comments are as follows. I think that the process overall was pretty good. The communication with the city, with staff, moved, somewhat slow at times, but understanding that we're all going through a pandemic and everybody is suffering with labor and or working remotely. Process is changing. We all understand that. But overall, I want to give my thanks to the city staff. I think they have done an excellent job.
Thank you for that. Thank you, staff, and thank you, applicant, for that feedback. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Lynn.
Yes, I appreciate the fact that this closer delivery to Broomfield may cut down a little bit on the carbon footprint of deliveries. What I was interested in was the statement in the memo that says the applicant is proposing to incorporate conduit for electric vehicle charging stations. to accommodate future electric vehicle charging capacity if demand warrants. So having just come from last night's ACES Energy Subcommittee meeting, we're in the details of trying to draft a proposal to meet our DHD goals. I guess I'll like to throw out a little peer pressure here. So we have this applicant, UPS, saying they're going to put in just EV conduit, not actual EV charging stations. That's what struck me. We've got Amazon, who is apparently putting huge pressure on manufacturing of EV vehicles in order to meet their demand for an all-electric delivery force. So I'm just thinking, why not the EV charging stations? Aren't you moving in that direction? Would the applicant like
This is Sergio. Yeah, this is Sergio again, and thank you for that question. Again, Mayor and Council, in response to that, yes, UPS is moving in that direction. But again, as we are designing and constructing buildings, our standards are changing, and this is one of them that's going to change rapidly in the coming years. In regards to the infrastructure that we are going to construct, yes, we want to be proactive and install that infrastructure now during construction, knowing that something is coming right around the corner that will make it easier for us to just add the equipment on the surface and connect to the building power. Now, in regards to the package delivery vehicles, yes, we are moving to EV in the future. But we are, as a corporation, they concentrate more in the larger cities first, and then it trickles down to the smaller communities. So will we see EV vehicles in Broomfield in the future? Yes, we will. When? I cannot answer that. It could be in the next 2 to 3 years, or it could be in the next 5 years. But we are moving in that direction as a corporation.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, we consider ourselves in Broomfield with our DHG goals as progressive as Denver. So I'll just, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem Juzer.
Thank you. I guess we're not quite as progressive as Boulder yet. So I fully support this project. I think this is really the perfect location for this, adjacent to the airport. I'm not sure what else could go in there, so happy to have this and happy to have UPS in our neighborhood. And I guess I would suggest maybe the lack of engagement that we saw on this project was probably somewhat just due to the fact that it's kind of a non-controversial project. It's away from residential neighborhoods. It's tucked next to the airport, so that's probably, at least how my bit to me. Also, it was one of the first ones that we did, so that doesn't concern me. The only question I have is why is Highway 128 referred to as Interlochen Loop? I always thought Interlochen Loop was the street that goes north into Interlochen. Plus, it's not a loop. Would you care to comment? I'm just kidding. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to kind of piggyback off of Councilmember Lynn's questions. When you're putting in the EV conduit, is that just for the commercial vehicles, the delivery trucks and the commercial vans and whatnot? Or is that also including for your employees who are driving electric cars?
This is Sergio again. Again, Mayor and Council, in response to that, the infrastructure that we are going to install is going to be for primarily the customers first, which will be at that point extended to the employees. But anything having to do internally with our package vehicles, everything will be inside the building. Paneling, services, all inside the doors, so you won't be able to see it. And just to give you an insight, inside our buildings, we have 2 docks that are going to run north and south. And all the brown, what we call the delivery package cars, you'll call a UPS truck. Those are they're package cars that are backed into the metro docks in the evening, and in the morning time we load into them. At night we close the doors, so they're inside the building. You won't see them, but we will at one point have charging stations right at the docks.
Okay, thank you. Since we already have the technology for electric cars, why are you not installing the EV chargers right off the bat for those customers who will be driving in or for your employees who will be working for you?
Would the applicant like to respond?
Could you please repeat the question?
Certainly. Why are you not then, since EV technology for cars does to an extent exist for certain people, why are you not implementing those chargers for both your customers that you're saying they're really the priority and then your employees secondary, especially since from what it looks like your wage structure, many of them will be able to afford a number of those EV cars.
Again, this is Sergio, Mayor and Council, in response to the question. At this time, we do not have building standards, and normally as a corporation, we develop standards. A lot of research goes into what we're going to do as a corporation nationally, because it not only affects us nationally, but it may affect us globally as well. So standards are researched first, then developed, then they get rolled out. So at this point, because a request was made by the city of Broomfield for the installation of the infrastructure, we agreed to that, knowing that UPS is moving in that same direction. The only thing we do not know at this point is what is the, I'm going to call it above the surface infrastructure going to look like for us. As a corporation, we do not know that yet. Will we know that in the next 6 months to a year? Most likely, but at this time we do not. But at least we'll have the infrastructure.
All right, thank you. My next question is going to be in regards to the electricity used by the building. Are you planning on using any sort of renewable fuel sources, such as solar panels, wind energy, etc.?
This is Sergio again, Mayor and Council, in response to the question. At this time, again, solar is one of those things that we're looking into. Nothing has been developed as a standard yet for the smaller sites, but we do have solar in larger facilities. But that's not to say we're not going to do anything for the smaller sites as well. We also do compressed natural gas for some of our vehicles in the large facilities like Commerce City. Is that going to transition into Broomfield in the future? Most likely. We're just not sure when. But yes, we are moving forward with all sorts of sustainable energy efforts.
All right. My only concern is that since this is a brand new build, and according to EPS's sustainability goals, by 2025, they want at least 25% renewable electricity for facilities, and then by 2035, 100%. I would think this is a great opportunity to right off the bat build a facility for renewable electricity instead of using outdated technology that is not climate conducive. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Sergio again, and in response to that, yes, I agree with you. We are going to move forward with sustainability efforts, and again, within that timeline, as you mentioned. But we, also we do our best to conserve energy. We use LED lighting throughout. We use high energy, high efficiency motors. We operate only as needed, when needed. We turn off lights, and we do our best to conserve energy.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other council member questions? Right, there being no further comments, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-10. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution 2022-10 by title?
Resolution number 2022-10, approving the Knudsen subdivision filing number 1, lot 3, site development plan.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Leslie?
Yes, I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Check it again, okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jezierski?
Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Lindstedt?
Yes.
Marsh Holston?
Yes.
Schaff?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Engel?
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Our next item under council business this evening is the monthly oil and gas update for January 2022. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
No, thank you. So thank you, Mayor. I will actually introduce Andrew Valdez, our interim director of strategic initiative, everything oil and gas and sustainability. So we'll hand it over to Andrew. We also have Dr. Weisner here with us tonight as well.
Thank you.
We were all taking bets that you guys are gonna go on break.
But I wanted to just power through it.
Okay, good deal. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So tonight is the January programmatic oil and gas update. As a heads up, next month's meeting is going to be all air quality. We'll be renewing our contracts with both Ajax and CSU and Boulder Air. And then they'll be delivering in person their fourth quarter 2021 reports. So we'll get the deep dive. Briefly on operations, we still are anticipating frac to resume sometime in mid-February on the United Pad. And Councilmember Schaff, I did not forget your question. So our folks at the COGCC didn't have any examples of local jurisdictions trying to pass laws to prevent return of like a frac spread. But this is a topic of conversation we're going to have in our local government roundtable next week. So still following up on that one. And I also know City Attorney Rogers sent an update kind of related to this topic today. So finally, before we get into the programmatic update, I did want to respond to some feedback we heard from residents about wanting more proactive communication regarding the January 14th event. What we've discussed with our team, with the communications team, is an email blast to our oil and gas Be in the Loop for non-emergent, high visibility events. This is not a technical definition. This is going to be a judgment call in here. And what we've tried to do is present the facts as they are known at the time within 30 to 60 minutes of our notification of the issue. The issue here and why we didn't have something set up before is that we're not emergency responders. So we don't have 24-hour coverage, and we can't promise that this is going to happen every time something, goes wrong. So at the end of the day, and I know nobody wants to hear this, it's the operator's obligation to notify emergency responders in the event of a potential or for sure emergent situation, which they did do, for the smoke event on the 14th. Beyond that, what we've requested is that the operator notify us and the fire department in the event of any automatic shutdown, which we now know preceded the smoke event by about 2 hours. So I did talk to Ms. Warnick out in the hallway today just to address your concerns before she left. So anyway, that's that. Next slide, please. All right, so first inspections updates. The spill at the Shannon Roberts 1A well in northern Broomfield caused that well to be placed on the state's orphan well program, and the remaining 3 wells in that Shannon Roberts group will most likely also be placed on that list within the next 45 days.
There's a mandatory return to compliance period that has to pass before the COGCC can collect their bond and they get updated to the list. These are, as I said, all in Northeast Broomfield and were owned by a now extinct operator. Through the Causa East consultation process, we are trying to expedite any cleanup on those 4 wells and 15 other wells that are located in that spacing unit. I can't promise anything right now, but Civitas has indicated willingness to work with us and State Commission on moving these up on the priority list. Based on their location, the COGCC would probably put these pretty low. And as we know, the orphan well list is growing, kind of by the day. So if we can get this happen sooner rather than later, it would be a good thing. We will obviously keep council informed. Next slide, please. All right, so progress update on soil gas. So high level overview, we have 111 plug and abandoned wells in Broomfield. We have located and tested 21, so those have been cleared. There are 42 wells that have been plugged and abandoned after 2015. So locational data on these is good. So we will be prioritizing these for soil gas testing with our consultant CRO in the coming weeks. And then we have 48 wells that we need to locate before we can soil gas test. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We've soil gas tested 46 wells, so just shy of half since we started the program, but I don't know how many need to be retested after we do the locates, kind of how we just did with the Anthem Ranch 6 wells. So that is update on soil gas. Next slide, please. Alrighty, air quality. Again, we'll be having our 4th quarter 2021 updates from Ajax and Boulder Air at the February 15th meeting. However, I did receive a highlights memo yesterday, which is available in your council packets from both our consultants. And just to get into a few of those highlights, we had 52 automatic trigger samples captured in the 4th quarter. 40 of those samples had 60-second VOC measurements, total VOC measurements of over 100 ppb. However, weekly canister samples continue to present at near background levels. The maximum 1-week benzene concentration was measured at 0.47 ppb. This is, of course, an average, and short duration plumes won't change this average very much. We don't have a 15-minute canister sample yet, but we've updated the hardware, and this will help us improve our 1-hour VOC calculations that Ajax includes when we do our triggers analysis reports. At the North Pecos Air Quality Monitoring Station, levels above 0.9 ppb of benzene were recorded 19 times in the quarter. Values started from 0.9 ppb up to 14.7 ppb, and this is for a 10-minute average. 13 of these values were measured when the wind was blowing in the general direction of the active northwest paths. And then just recall that we use 9 ppb as our health guideline benchmark. And again, we'll have a deep dive on this topic at the February 15th meeting, I believe. All right, next slide, please. Noise monitoring. So Broomfield had a meeting with Civitas representatives on January 6th, where we discussed upcoming operations at the United and interchange paths. And I believe yesterday you also received an update from the city attorney on the noise violations and our pending settlement agreement. So I won't get into that tonight. Next slide. Right. So on mitigations, this is what's been proposed for the United pad, which will be the next active pad. Fortunately, this area isn't as densely populated as where the Northwest pads were. However, we will still be actively monitoring for exceedances. There's a lot kind of on the diagram. It's not super legible, the writing there, but I think we'll see the most benefit from the mobile walls and the pad configuration, which will block line of sight out of the pad from the noisy pieces of equipment. We're also curious about what reductions we might see with added frac pumps. This is theoretically bringing down the mechanical loads of the entire spread so they don't have to go up to such high RPMs. This remains to be seen whether this will provide any relief, but we will be watching for that. Next slide, please. For interchange, this is the mitigation we have requested and will be pushing very hard for. These are 32-foot sound walls outside of the pads, between the pads and the neighborhood. It's not showing up very well there, but you can see the bottom left, Adams County, all of those are those residential areas down there. I think we saw quite a benefit to this mitigation when they fractured the Northwest B pad. So this is going to be our request going forward. So with that, I will turn over the presentation to Dr. Weisner. And of course, we'll be around for questions and clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Melvin. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Megan Weisner, Senior Environmental Epidemiologist. Next slide, please. One brief slide for you tonight to sum it all up. The oil and gas health study has, the data collection period has concluded. I'm very excited to announce that the data analysis is underway with CU professors and our research assistant. We had a very excellent turnout of surveys. We received nearly 500 responses. So after data validation, we have about 486 total that we are including in this write-up. So that's pretty remarkable. I want to say thank you so much to all the residents that participated in this survey. Your responses matter, and it's just greatly appreciated that you took the time. So as promised, we did select 10 random participants to receive a $50 gift card. So those residents have been notified at this time if they were one of the recipients. So can't give you all a gift card, but we were able to give a few people randomly selected gift cards. So by the end of January, as promised, a preliminary report will be made available to City Council and the public, summarizing the distribution of responses and basic demographics of the respondents. So this is not a data analysis, but we do want to show you, here's the number of responses we received near oil and gas versus away from oil and gas. And here's some of the breakdowns of the demographics. I think that's important information we want to relay out to everyone. So please watch for that report. We'll make that available by the end of this month. I wish it would have been ready for tonight, but we're on track for next week. So I'll get that to you soon. Study results are expected to be shared with the public by late spring 2022. I do want to say that the results won't be peer reviewed at that time. It will be the results that myself, the professors from CU, and our research assistant have come up with. Sometimes after the peer review process, things can change a little bit. We don't expect that, but I just want to let everybody know there is that little caveat. They won't be the peer reviewed results, but they will certainly be made available to council and to the public so that you know what's going into the manuscript and what's being submitted for peer review. In other updates, I'm excited to announce that the COGCC has released its first ever cumulative impacts report, and they have their eyes on this oil and gas health study. So they did acknowledge in the report that they may include findings from our health study in subsequent cumulative impacts reports. So I think that's movement in the right direction. And I'll be here to take any questions. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weisner. We'll start with public comment. Are we? Yeah, we are. Does any member of the public have any comments on this agenda item? All right, questions from City Council are next. Are there any questions from Council? Councilmember Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I should direct this to Ms. Yeoman as Assistant City Manager for the City Manager. Several people tonight and a number of folks have expressed their frustration that they called 911 but couldn't get any kind of feedback as to what happened on the January 14th incident. And I know that the county is reviewing the whole emergency response process, and I just would like to encourage that management include in that analysis some way of being able to respond back to people who are calling 911 because they're scared. And we heard that, I think, expressed very well tonight. After the Marshall Fire, given, the whole plethora of issues around our local environment, and our animals and our pets and our families and everything else, I think it would be beneficial if there was some way to get a response back. A, that nothing happened, or B, there's an emergency and we need to act. So I would really encourage the team to include that in your assessment.
So we appreciate that feedback, Councilmember Leslie. Just for everyone, we are doing fire debriefs actually right now. I think, and Clay's back there, he'll keep me honest here. We completed, I think, the internal ones last Friday. We had our last one on Friday. And then we have a meeting with North Metro Fire, I think on February 7th. Just keeping me honest, Clay. So we will add that to the list. I'm always careful. I don't want to ever overpromise and underdeliver, right? I'm not PD. I don't run the dispatch, so I want to be careful. But we'll add that to our list to discuss.
Thank you. And I have a question, Mr. Valdez. I'm just curious about the bales of hay that are included in the sites. It was a comment made tonight about the dry bales of hay. And again, given the concerns about fire, whether that is an appropriate barrier, and then help me understand what purpose do they serve?
That's a good question. The intended purpose is actually a little bit of noise mitigation. I think they do some benefit. It's probably marginal. It also blocks line of sight, which can, for especially like residents that are far away, it's not so front of mind. We requested those bales of hay. So we could explore what options there are. They are, before they're deployed, they are made sure that they're not so dry that they're combustible. And then that's why they replace them kind of on a cyclical basis. So once they do dry out after the summer, they'll go out and replace them. This is the direction council wants to go, to request removal of bales. That's something to explore.
Okay, again, this is not my area of expertise, but certainly the issue was raised about their potential flammability. B, given how low they are and small compared to the walls and stuff, I'm not sure what benefit they add to quote line of sight unquote. And you've already said, not sure how much they actually do. It might be worthwhile revisiting that to see whether their presence is more of a fear factor than it is a benefit. Because if there were fires, then that could certainly enhance the flammability of the whole site. So I would certainly encourage a review of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that.
Anybody else?
Councilmember Anderson. Thank you. I do have a few questions, and they mostly relate to the recent incident at the Northwest Path. So to start with, and I should start with saying thank you, Dr. Weisner, for the update on that study, and that is getting closer. And I'm glad to hear that there were so many responses. It was 500 out of 800. So that is significant. So thank you. So going back to the fire smoke incident at the Northwest Pad, can you describe, a lot of these questions relate to like the combustion and the ECD. And I don't know if you have the answers to some of these. If not, we'll table them for later. Do you know they are using that IES 96-inch combustor and not the cluster one? So trying to kind of compare the two. But do you know if that ECD unit is designed to combust flowback fluid?
It's in normal operation, it's only designed to combust gas. This was an upset condition and it combusted fluid, flowback fluid. If enough, I mean, I don't know where you're going with this, but if enough flowback fluid were combusted, the potential for a bigger incident or damage is certainly real.
Okay, and that might actually answer the next question, because I looked up the specifications, I can't find the numbers here. Because I think that was also designed for 99.9% efficiency. I think we had some of this was like we want 98%, greater than 98% efficiency. And they note a number on the IES doesn't provide a whole lot of specifications, but they include 1 million CFD, which I'm assuming is cubic feet per day. So I guess you already kind of maybe distinguished that that's a volume gas and not a liquid, but I was just kind of doing the math on this. So I'm like, well, at 1 million cubic feet per day, that equates to 87 gallons per second. So extraction head, and you can convert that later. I'll check it a couple times. But if you have the 87 gallons per second, and they noted that there's 1 to 2 gallons of flowback fluid that causes a flashing flow. So maybe what you just indicated that that's a liquid, that was a liquid and not a gas. Otherwise, if you can combust 87 gallons per second, you wouldn't even notice 2 gallons. So I'm just curious if that's really how much fluid went through there.
So sorry, what, the question is, what exactly?
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how they could estimate that it's just 1 to 2 gallons.
Oh, okay, all
that
right.
it can combust 87 gallons per second.
So we had this question as well, right? How do you know it was that much liquid? It was the volume of liquid between the automatic shutoff and the combustor left in about a 20 to 30 foot segment of pipe. So they did a volume calculation, and that's when they got that number.
Okay, so maybe perhaps had that been a gas that should have been going through the combustor versus the liquid, maybe that is what was the defining factor on why it resulted in the flame and smoke.
Well, so the failure was upstream. So there shouldn't have been liquid in that segment of pipe to begin with. They drained the pipe, clearly not sufficiently enough. And there was whatever was left over in there, when they turned it back on, is what caused the smoke in the flame.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I do have a question. I can take very good notes here. So then going back to the CDPHE, we had to do the CDPHE, and I'm wondering if you could, this might be another hard question. We continue to look at, and we have been looking at the benzene, whether or not to distinguish benzene from all the other chemicals, and not why we always focus on benzene, because there's so many other chemicals that are a possibility. But if we look at the benzene, we've been using the ATSDR guideline of 9 parts per billion for acute health guideline. And the CDPHE referenced the 2,500 parts per billion, the mouse study, and the 2,000 parts per billion. That's just a big question for Dr. Weisner.
Yeah, we're doing some follow-up.
So, yeah, I don't know, is now appropriate time to discuss that, or is there more information coming on that? Why such a significant difference, especially when got a lot of feedback from sources, reputable sources saying, like, some sources say 100 parts per billion of benzene, you need a high quality respirator, and yet we're looking at some pretty substantial kind of numbers. So, any idea you can clarify on that'd be great.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. So was your question to clarify why did CDPHE present that 2,500 ppb number? Okay. So I'm actually meeting with them tomorrow to ask that exact same question. I will let you know that I dug into the research quite a bit, and I spoke with Dr. Lisa McKenzie, and she's very familiar with that study, the ATSDR study, where they derived that 9 ppb. So that was based on the 1984 study by Rosen et al. That looked at mice that were exposed to benzene for 6 hours a day for 6 days. And that study in 1984 found the mice had reactions, immunological reactions at 10,000 ppb. Now we know that's a mouse, that's not a human. So that number has to be controlled for and converted for sensitivity factors, for human metabolism, for other things like the fact that that study never said when did the mice not experience a reaction. They never established a no observed effect in that study. They only observed the lowest level at which a mouse would have a reaction, but they didn't go anywhere below that. So that's another uncertainty factor. So the 2,500 parts per billion is a partially adjusted number for those uncertainty factors. What I'm going to clarify on my meeting tomorrow is exactly why that number was presented and why that's beneficial for us to know, and if there's something that we need to understand a little bit more about that. So I'll circle back with you.
Okay, thank you, and I very much appreciate that clarification. And then also, I think we're still waiting on the responses to the rest of the questions on CPAG. Those are coming too, right?
Yes, they are. They wanted to run them by everybody in their shop before they got published, so it's in the works.
Okay, thank you. And then one final question here has to do with the this has to do with the air quality monitoring during that event on Northwest Path. I think this might be, maybe hold this for next month when we do the air quality report. But I think what some of the residents, and then this is like curiosity is, why, how can you have a big black plume and nothing picked up? And just want to know, maybe one adding thing to it that we did receive the analysis from Boulder Air. The winds were going towards the southwest, that area where we don't actually have an air quality monitor. Is there anything you can add to that?
I think, well, so it was hot, and the plumes that we're seeing from direct emissions are like ambient. So heat rises, so create a column, and there wasn't anything observable at ground level. But I think this will be a topic of conversation in the February meeting.
Okay, and that's all my questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I guess start with the January 14th fire again. In the extraction root cause analysis, am I understanding it correctly that downline, as you described it in the process, it's not the beginning of the problem, but the ECD lines were not evacuated before the ECD was engaged, before the restart was done? Was that human error? And in their list of correctable actions, is that still a human process? Or is extraction suggesting that they're going to come up with some technology to prevent that from happening again?
Okay, so a couple of things there. So they did drain the line. Clearly, it was not fully drained. That human error, I'm not extractions communications department, and clearly for our purposes, it was whatever response was done at the time was inadequate. They've installed sensors to now know whether or not fluid is going from a compressor to the lines that feed the ECD. So that's one countermeasure. What we've requested verbally is that any incident like this, now you got to blow down the line fully and know that there's nothing left over when you start things back up. This was an accident. Is the next accident going to be the same flavor? I don't know. What we're trying to do with the notification of any kind of automatic shutdown is to get eyes on this kind of earlier on in the process, notify the first responders, notify our community, and let them know that they need to do everything perfectly. That's kind of where we're at. That's all I have.
And you've indicated we will have a meeting, or you're trying to get a meeting?
I know a meeting's been requested. I don't know the status of that.
Okay, certainly the residents are in favor of that. And in your conversations with North Metro Fire and Rescue, they responded, my understanding is they responded to the pad, said, oh, there's nothing to see here, and left. Is that their normal response? And took extraction's word for it, that there was nothing to see here also. So was Did they receive any information? I guess probably not. From extraction that something else preceded this that could have been a concern? Did they think that they needed to do a little more investigation and just show up and say, hey, there's no stuff?
It's a good, I mean, it's a good question. I would probably better directed towards the fire chief. My guess is that they're saying, okay, they're assessing the situation. Is this an ongoing situation? Is anything actively on fire? If it's not, that might be the end of the incident as far as they're concerned. But, you know, again, I don't presume to speak for the fire chief.
Okay. And then in the root cause analysis, extraction says they will apply corrective actions to the other pads. There's no tomorrow or next week, next month.
Right. Yeah, and we clarified that as well. So what our request was, before receiving any flowback fluids, all of these need to be, you know, fail tested. That was our request, and they verbally complied.
Okay. Other questions of it's December 4th. So we have now the unprecedented events, air quality events during mill out on Northwest A, which I would surmise no one expected to have the highest methane report value ever by Boulder Air at in any of their 4 years at any site in any of their operations. We had 4 trigger canisters go off at the same time. We had a 1 hour average estimate for benzene at 186 parts per billion. We asked APCD to get the logs of extraction. And where does that stand?
Unfortunately, we hit a dead end with APCD. However, in our recent conversations with COGCC inspectors, we were trying to use that avenue. And for that event, and for there's another event I think on the 19th that we were kind of curious about, and then this event. So we requested logs for 3 events through COGCC. As soon as I have an update there, Council.
Okay, there was some speculation when I asked a question on the dashboard about December 4th. There was actually some speculation that December 4th event occurred at night. So we didn't have any residents taking video. So we really don't know what happened during that incident, if it could have been like January 14th. So the inspectors, the response on the dashboard was, it would have made sense if that December 4th event had been caused by some ECD usage.
So I can explore this with the air quality team, but I know there's a very different signature in combustion versus direct emission.
Okay.
And I'm almost sure this was clearly direct emission.
Direct
emission. Let me find out.
Okay. So as we're going forward with mill out, we're going to mill out on other pads. And we have absolutely no idea what caused that December 4th unusual circumstance with that huge benzene exceedance. It does not make me feel comfortable. And I don't understand why we can't get the state agencies to ask extraction to give us those logs.
Yeah, well, we're continuing to pursue those avenues. We're as curious as you are, I promise.
Okay. Have the Ajax sensors were down at the time of the commercial fire due to some clouding of the lenses or something. So have we solved that problem so that that won't reoccur?
Well, if we had another fire event, like the Marshall Fire, which hopefully we don't, I don't know. But the system is back online, fully back online as of, I think a week and a half ago.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shao.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions about the January 14th incident have all been answered. Thanks to my colleagues for your great questions. Thanks to the residents for your continued engagement. I do hope at a minimum, for improved communications from Civitas in the future. So, really our entire community isn't, unnecessarily disturbed, ignited, inflamed. I do want to thank this Broomfield team, Andrew and Megan, for your continued, deal with this issue, which Broomfield did not ask for. You continue to help enforce a contract that is not great, and you work with a very engaged community here on Broomfield. So thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your continued work on this. I do want to ask about the soil gas testing. You had talked about there's still 42 P&A wells to still be located. I'm curious what the timeline looks like for locating those 42 P&A wells, and if there's anything additional that those landowners, because I assume that some of these are on privately held land, what those landowners can do to assist in locating those P&A wells.
So that's exactly the bottleneck is legal consent and access. So we need to acquire that from the homeowner before we get on private property. A lot of these are on public right of way or on Broomfield property. So of that 48 that have been plugged and abandoned post 2015, we can knock out the ones that are on public property or city property pretty quickly. It's just getting the consents for all the other ones that are going to be tough. And it's just a matter of when we send emails, we send letters. Sometimes we've knocked on doors and stuff to get consents. Sometimes people are out on vacation, whatever. So it's just kind of this thing that we just gotta stay on top of.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify. You said that some of these wells are on either right of way or city and county Broomfield property. Yeah. Are any of these 42 wells in right of way or city owned property?
Before 2015 or after 2015?
Well, I'm just saying that there's 42 additional wells that need to be located still.
Okay, so let's maybe go with this slide. Jake, sorry.
What slide number, Andrew?
I think it's 3.
Perfect.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so 21, good to go. 42 still need to locate before we soil gas test. So that'll be the 2-step process. And then prioritize locates before soil gas test. 42, no need to locate. Yep. We already know good locational data on those. So of those 42, all those that are on public right of way and all those that are city owned property, we can go do immediately. I think there's at least 10, it might be 15. Don't quote me. The rest we will need to get consents for those. The other ones, the 48, it's this 2-step process where we have this magnetometer, we brought this project in-house. We have one of our inspectors trained on it. He locates the wellhead, and then we do the soil gas test on the wellhead to make sure we're testing in the right spot. So to be clear, we have 90, right? That's 90 wells to clear.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification. So the 42, some of those are on Broomfield on property or in right of way. So we can take care of those a little bit easier than the ones that are on private property. But the 48, those could be on Broomfield owned property or in right of way or in private residence. Right. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And so really just the thing that landowners can do is help respond to communications to provide access, right?
Yeah, so if we hit some dead ends, we did this a little bit with Councilmember Anderson. She helped get a couple of consents for us in Anthem. If we hit some dead ends, we may be relying on some of you all to do some outreach. HOAs are also kind of a help. I mean, we just kind of have to attack it at all angles.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, please let me know how I can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen, did you want to?
I just had a quick question to jump back to something Councilmember Leslie brought up. In terms of, I think we can all appreciate how scary it is after the Marshall Fire to be alerted to smoke by your dog. They usually don't lead you wrong, but the whole issue of how to properly notify people, it's counterintuitive to send out an alert when there is no danger. Though, I've done emergency alerts for 20 years at universities. And when we started out, we were very limited on sending out alerts because we wanted people to react immediately when they saw our alert. And we didn't want to send too many because then people would become numb to them. But that's changed over the years dramatically. People are much more anxious, thanks to school shootings in general, but much more anxious and want to be alerted to be assured that we know what's going on and there's no danger. So I'm just curious, in light of the Marshall Fire, you mentioned, Abby, some postmortems that are taking place. I wonder if there's additional ones that your city of Broomfield being involved in to learn from what Louisville and Superior gained from their experience, in particular the issues of notifying people about evacuation. I know there was an issue of some people felt they didn't get alert. And also whether it's worthwhile us having some sort of study session dedicated to hearing the results of those postmortems and applying them to whatever we need to look at going forward.
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Cohen. So I'm actually going to ask Clay Shuck to join us at the dais. He can kind of go into a little bit more detail. Clay is, I don't know, wearing 12 hats. Clay's been kind of that utility. We always call him the shortstop, right? So he's serving kind of an interim emergency manager role at this time. So Clay, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Cohen. Again, Council Clay Shuck, Director of Parks, Recreation, Senior Services, and interim city, county, emergency manager. I think through our after action reports, really what we want to do was first look at internal gaps we had internally. That secondary look would probably be with our neighbors in the surrounding areas. Unfortunately, right now, they are all still actively in response. I was on a meeting today, and it's pretty amazing what's still going on from a response capacity for all those organizations. So I do see that at some point in time, it would be worthwhile for us to meet with the other emergency manager and really get that debrief going. What could we do better as an overall region? But I don't foresee that happening for probably several months. So, but we're chatting, writing down the things that we want to accomplish and need to accomplish, and we'll definitely put that down as something we want to do. Thank you.
Any other council member questions or comments? All right, do you guys need a break or do you want to keep going? I know I'm torn. We have like one more item, but I mean, really two, right? Okay, sorry. Let's do a 5-minute break. Instead of 10, so we can not keep our wonderful folks in the back waiting too long. So it's 8:24. We'll be back at 8:30.
I was talking.
Oh, wait. Okay, we'll just move on. They'll get here. Our final item under council business this evening includes 2 resolutions approving agreements with community partners for grant funding. Item 17B under special reports is a companion memo covering the same topic. So council will cover both items concurrently at this time. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to ask Dan Casey, our Director of Human Services, to come up and walk us through this item. Dan?
Thank you. Let me take this off so I can see. So I fog my glasses up if I don't. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. I'm Dan Casey. I'm the Director of Human Services, and I am going to walk you quickly through 2 resolutions and then 1 special report, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. First thing I want to do is say a special thanks to my Deputy Director, Kari Hunt, and also our contracts manager, Mandy Walk, who put a lot of work into this process. Without them, a lot of this work wouldn't have gotten done. And I will also say, this is probably my favorite topic to talk to council about, just because this means giving back to our community and helping support our nonprofits. I always say it takes a village for us to do a lot of the work we do. Without our nonprofits and our partner agencies, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So a huge thank you to our nonprofits. The first one I'll quickly talk about is Resolution 2022-17, the contract for Imagine. Imagine is our designated CCB, which is Community Center Board, and they are responsible for providing access and entry services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have to have a CCB, so Imagine serves in that capacity. They actually contract with the state of Colorado Healthcare Policy and Finance Department to provide those CCB services. Imagine this year requested just over $700,000, and we were able to fund them at $500,000. Last year they asked for about $900,000, and we funded them at $541,000. There was a slight decrease in the amount of funding that we were able to provide them this year. Imagine also gets about 1/3 of our funding, so we have to always keep that in balance when we're thinking about how to fund our other agencies. The second memo that I'll talk, or resolution I'll talk briefly about, is 2022-18, and that is our contract or our grant funding for mental health partners. Mental Health Partners is one of our community mental health centers in Broomfield, and they provide services to a broad number of Broomfield residents, including our indigent and our Medicaid population. Last year, they requested about $400,000, and they were funded at $210,000. This year, they asked for $406,000 roughly, and we funded them at $255,000. So those were the 2 big ones. Anything that's over $200,000, we bring to council for approval. And now I'll switch into the balance of our nonprofit agencies and talk about funding for them. Again, like I said earlier, I'm happy to come and talk about these. And one of the other things that I'm really happy to say today is we had 44 applicants this year, which is our most ever. We've never had that many applicants before. The bad thing is they requested about $204 million, which we only have about $1.5 million in our budget for this grant cycle. We were able to fund 42 of those 44, and 2 of those agencies we didn't fund. We had 10 brand new applications, and of those 10, 8 of them got funding. And then quickly talk about our process. We started this process in 2018 when I first came in. This process was delayed, so folks were getting their money in the middle of the year. So we accelerated that grant process, and now we're able to fund them at the beginning of the calendar year. Once we started that, we started what we're referring to as a continual quality improvement process, or CQI. And some of the things we added in 22 Things we added in 19 and 20 and 21 are in the memo, so I'll highlight some things from 22. This year, we really took a DEAI or diversity focus. We established tiered funding. So we have a 1, 2, and 3 tier funding process. Tier 1 is for new applicants up to 15,000 or any applicant up to 15,000. Tier 2 is 15 to 75,000 and tier 3 is 75,000 and above. And there's a few things that we do with those tiers, like tier 3 are required to be part of a group that will get together and make sure that we're networking properly, that we're not duplicating efforts, that we're, again, it takes a village, that we're using all of those agencies to focus on outcomes. And we also continue to keep evolving this program, figuring out different ways to fund better, fund more streamlined, fund more effectively, so that we're not throwing good money after bad outcomes. A couple of the highlights that we're going to look at moving into 2023 are a partnership with the Broomfield Community Foundation on some of our lower level grant funding. Really looking at data and how data can drive some of our decisions around funding. And then also the possibility, and Brenda left already, but I'm talking with Brenda, the possibility to do multi-year funding. For a lot of our providers, it's hard to do year by year funding. So if we could do a 2 or a 3 or a 5 year funding, that might allow them to have better outcomes longitudinally. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to ask or answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. We'll now proceed with public comments for items 11D and 17B. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please press *3, state your first and last name and neighborhood for the record. So we'll go to our caller, and we have Sarah Taylor. You have 3 minutes.
Hello. Hello, Mayor and Council. Hi. Sarah Taylor, first filing. I just wanted to call and express my support for all of the nonprofit grant funding in general, and specifically for Imagine and Mental Health Partners, who are, just like everyone else, just being overwhelmed in the pandemic. And please grant them their money quickly so that they can get back to work and not worry about the grant. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. We'll now go to questions from council. Any council members have questions or comments? Councilmember Shah?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your work on these grants, and thank you to the rest of the committee that works on evaluating these grants as well. There's a big team that goes about making sure that these communities, that Broomfield community is supported by these community organizations. Broomfield saw a major increase in the applicants, and thus a lot of the awards were under what was either requested by the applicant or was requested and what was seen in previous awards by these applicants. And, you know, sometimes, you know, in some of the other grant opportunities, you know, providing more organizations with fewer dollars doesn't necessarily mean that the deliverables are happen with those programs. Sometimes those entities aren't able to come through with the deliverables that they need because the dollars just aren't there. So you had mentioned a little bit of this, but I'm curious to follow up. With the large increase of applicants, what changes will be made to ensure that these organizations can continue to offer services to the Broomfield community with the necessary resources? Was there consideration to the number served and types of services offered when distributing grants? And you talked a little bit about the kind of tiered system. So looking at new organizations versus returning organizations.
Yeah, I might have to come back to you, Councilmember Schaaf, because there was a lot there, and I think I've got it all. But it is difficult when we have so many applicants and we're trying to weigh the needs of the community and also the viability of kind of our network of nonprofits to make sure that our ecosystem is healthy there as well. We really did take a deep dive into all of those things that you mentioned, the number of clients served, the services that they provide. Council priorities are human services strategic priorities. things that we know that our community needs. And not funding a couple of these nonprofits was very difficult as well, but at some point you have to draw that line in the sand and say, what can we afford and what can we afford? I think another thing through our CQI process, our continued quality improvement process, is that we are looking at ways to partner with other entities. Again, I mentioned Broomfield Community Foundation. And is there a possibility for us to grant them a certain amount of dollars and then have some of those other entities be funded through Broomfield Community Foundation, where then we can focus our money on our big outcomes, right? So let's say mental health, behavioral health, homelessness, some of the big initiatives we're working on internally, we can start to really define how we get better outcomes from those without losing that juice for those smaller nonprofits that may be doing something in a different space than housing or mental health, right? So that's again, it's tricky for us. I wish we had 2.4 million and we could have funded everybody at their ask, and that's just not feasible. But yeah, we definitely take into account all of those things. I know a year or two ago, we had talked about the number of clients served. We definitely look at number of clients served, but we also look at what that service being provided is, right? It's a different service when, or a different cost when we're talking about therapeutic services versus maybe food distribution, right? You can feed a lot more people for the same cost that you can do therapy for others, right? So there's a lot of things that go into play, and we take all that into account. And if you don't mind, I want to take just a hot minute to highlight a couple of the new providers that we're funding this year. And this I hope will help answer the question about how we make sure that we're putting the money in the right places. One of them is Almost Home. Almost Home is an organization that is working in Adams County right now, and I think maybe some others, but they really focus on street outreach and engagement and case management with unhoused. They're also going to partner with us on our Code Blue and our cold weather sheltering, and they're also experts in rapid rehousing. So things that we don't have expertise in, they're going to bring to the table. Bayard, that's an agency that offers vocational rehabilitation and job services for the Denver metro area for folks with disabilities, economic challenges. And so we're funding them this year. This is their first time that they've applied, and we want to make sure that we get them in the door and then figure out how we align them with maybe some of our other providers to get the most efficiency out of their programs. Conscious Alliance is another one that I wanted to quickly highlight. They're a Broomfield-based organization, and they work with, they do hunger relief, and they provide food and they distribute food. So Conscious Alliance has a location property in Broomfield, and they had not partnered with us previously. So it was great to see them apply this year. And then the last one that I wanted to bring up, there's so many, but I can't read them all. The last one that I wanted to bring up was Joyful Journeys. And Joyful Journeys is another place that is located in Broomfield, and again, had no partnership with Human Services until this year. So they provide a lot of different services, recreational services, vocation, education, clothing, other resources for individuals. So again, not directly answering your question, but making sure that we understand how our dollars are most effectively being used in our community to meet those needs of our community.
Thank you. Well, and thank you to all those that applied, and thank you and congratulations to all those that were awarded. You know, what you had said, looking at the needs of our community and ensuring that there's a robust ecosystem. I really appreciated how you phrased that. And I would like to hear, you know, a follow-up perhaps maybe next year about how that ecosystem has changed, especially or enhanced because of these new organizations, and how that ecosystem looks to determine what services are still lacking in our community, what services need to be enhanced, where there are holes, and what populations aren't being served.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that, Councilmember Shad. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? Well done. And please pass along our gratitude to Ms. Walkie and Mr. Hunt for all of their hard work and all those who volunteered.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make sure I pass that on.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. We're not done yet. I always do that. I get like so excited. Like we have work to do now. First is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2022-17. Will the clerk please read proposed resolution number 2022-17 by title?
Resolution number 2022-17, authorizing and approving an agreement by and between the city and county of Broomfield and Imagine for Developmental Disabilities Services.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Ward,
So moved.
is there a second? Councilmember Leslie?
Second, please.
Thank you. Will the clerk, are we going to do both and then vote?
Mayor, can I move that we do both?
Well, I think we have to do them separately, or you tell me, Ms. Rogers. I'll just follow.
Give me 10 seconds to think.
Okay.
I think we can move them together, Councilmember Leslie. If you want to make a motion to approve both resolution 2022-17 and 2022-18.
Yes, I move both 2022-17 and 2022-18.
Awesome. Would you like to second that?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Leslie,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Winstead,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Schaff,
Yes and yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle,
Absolutely, yes.
Jersey.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. So thank you, Mr. Casey. And we're moving on to the city and county attorney's report. Do you have a report, Ms. Rogers?
No, but I was just telling Assistant City and County Manager Yeoman that that's an interesting concept. And when we see an opportunity to do that again, we can group things together. It still needs to be 2 resolutions, but we'll try to do that grouping just for efficiency.
Always love it.
And maybe it only happens once a year, but it's exciting.
Thank you very much. The Assistant City and County Manager's report is next. Ms. Yeldon, do you have a report?
I do not. I would just like to say, because I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to thank Council, our Mayor Pro Tem Jazerski for still talking to me this week after the football game on Sunday. So thank you.
Every time I forget about it, you bring it up.
All right, there is no legislative update or any business before the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority or the Orissa Local Improvement District Board of Directors this evening. The fourth quarter 2021 expense report for elected officials is provided on this evening's agenda under special reports and council reviews. Item 17B earlier in the agenda with item 11D. So the final item of business for council's consideration this evening is Councilmember Henkel's request for future action regarding a request to direct staff to discuss support for Broomfield residents on humanitarian parole. Before I ask Councilmember Henkel to provide a brief summary of her request, I want to remind council that this is not a discussion on the topic tonight, and instead the opportunity for council to provide staff direction on whether or not council desires staff to dedicate time and resources to this request. Councilmember Henkel, would you like to give us an overview?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I want to remind everyone that my last 18A request, I literally just said it was in reference to an email, so it's very short. This one, it hits a lot closer to a lot of our constituents that are really concerned about the humanitarian parole situation with our Afghan evacuees and anyone else who's under humanitarian parole. Next slide, please. Always wanted to say that. Next slide, please. A lot of people, and the reason why I did a slide presentation is because a lot of people don't understand what humanitarian parole is. I hate that word parole because it sounds like you've been in jail and now you're out. But humanitarian parole describes an immigration status that resulted from a humanitarian emergency, such as the fall of Afghanistan. The U.S. has been involved in the war in Afghanistan and trained their government to be self-sufficient, but their government collapsed on August 15th and left many of those who were serving our government stranded in their government and our veterans feeling helpless. Next slide, please. So the problem or the challenges here are that the Afghanistan government doesn't exist anymore. And it failed many of those who served not only their country, but ours as well. Our own government also failed those who applied for SIV status, and just in 2017, only a quarter of those who are normally approved for special immigrant visas were approved due to the ban on immigrants on Muslim countries. Our government continues to fail these families by only giving them only $1,225 per person. That's it, not even per month. That's it. In APA funding and what's called Afghan Placement and Assistance Program. Next slide, please. So this is kind of what the funding looks like. They get $1,225 per person. They get $600 a month from either grants or federal dollars. You guys have heard of TANF before. That can range between $600 to $800, but I'm mostly saying $600. An average for a family of 6 for food each month is about $1,000. We also are receiving donations of household goods from our community. An average rent in Broomfield, for instance, though, is about $2,800 per month, and active landlords generally will not lease to someone who does not have employment. I could not find the Siddiquis any place, obviously, to have them rent unless they have employment. The Siddiqui family, for example, even when we did get them a house, the landlords asked for $7,500 up front, and monthly rent is $2,500. So we got $3,500 from Fish. We got $1,500 from a resettlement agency, and we got $1,500 from the Broomfield Community Foundation. And then the rest of the rent is due in March. And the landlords hold that. Next slide, please. Who are the Broomfield Afghan families on humanitarian parole? So these are real pictures of families that are either going to be in Broomfield or are in Broomfield now. A lot of these families have what we call anchor families that live in Broomfield, and their family relatives are served alongside them in the military. Many have college degrees from India and Afghanistan and are professionals seeking careers. They are working with Lutheran Family Services Resettlement Agency and also our Broomfield Afghan Evacuee Task Force. Just a side note on this note, the two gentlemen at the bottom are two single gentlemen, and they are in a hotel that we don't disclose where they are. But they are waiting to be housed in the new Academy Place apartments on 120th. We actually have 4 families that are going to be moving into there, but right now they're in temporary housing. Next slide, please. So what has Broomfield been doing well? I will tell you that our resettlement agencies are so proud of Broomfield. So we have a lot to be proud of, and I want to make sure that we note this. I love when Dan Casey came up here because I've been in that building for many months now, since October, and it's just a well-run machine over there. Our applicants are treated with quickly and with dignity. I will tell you, I was in tears this week because I sat down with an applicant in a different county, and we were transferring his benefits to Broomfield, but he had to go through an application interview in another county. Not only did they not call him at the specified time they were supposed to call him, but we called them and we tried to give them information. And all they asked were, well, do you have your social security number yet? They don't have their social security number yet. And they didn't have another number. And so he started getting frustrated and the county hung up on him. I was sitting right there. And I'm so proud our county does not do that. Our workforce center has specialists working with resumes and job searches. Our library director and board, they've also reached out to get families books and offer tours of the library. Here's some mental health and transportation and community challenges for Broomfield families. Our 2 families here survived the Kabul explosion, where we have children having multiple surgeries, are learning to walk again, and shrapnel are still in their bodies. One child was put into a coma in Afghanistan and woke up in America without her parents there. Her parents later came and is now living with her. Language is a barrier for connection for a lot of these families. Families are feeling loss of family members who have died in the explosion and those left back home, and they were stuck at home to think about this trauma. So they don't have transportation to go get these needs met. Many of them have served our country and lost everything, to include their homes. They've lost employment, community connections, savings. They cannot get their savings out of Afghanistan. The Afghan banks will only let them release $100 a day, and you have to be in the country. They also lost a sense of security and dignity. These are normally families that give to their community when they're in Afghanistan, and out here, they're receiving donations. Next slide, please. So we've heard about the hierarchy of needs. We have this sense of safety and belonging. And while our nonprofit players who are assisting are providing a lot of these physiological and safety items, we still have some more work to do. So Broomfield Fish has stepped forward and helped provide financial support for some housing and also food pantry access. The Broomfield Community Foundation has started a fund. We have added up to it was 10,000, but we've used 1,000 of it for housing and also another 10,000 in other funds. We have Medicaid that does not cover like eyeglasses, for instance. And so they're about $200 a piece that covers that. Lutheran Family Services, A Precious Child, and then our volunteer services with our Broomfield Afghan Evacuee Task Force, which has 5 people in the task force and about 30 volunteers. Next slide, please. Studies show that immigrants are more successful when the community supports them. Their government failed them. Our government has failed them and continues to do so. There's no reason why our local governments should continue this trend. And I feel like our local government can step forward where other governments have failed them. So here's some examples of where we can move forward with the neighbors in need. Mental health, access to recreation centers, community centers, and more. Transportation, flex ride, more flex ride options. And then ELL support of learning the English language, even a place to meet. So it's not necessarily in someone's house all the time. And then just more connections with our resettlement agencies. I've already reached out to Lutheran Family Services and asked them, what could we do better as a government? And I hope that our staff could do that as well. And the financial piece of this could be, we have a change in our policy on like our travel budget. That's, $6,500. And also something that our city and county could do to be a resource to these families. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening to me tonight. These are just a snippet of some of our families. We do have a family of 18 living together in one house with bedrooms we have 5 bedrooms there. And one of those families is going to move into the Academy Place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Henkel. We'll now proceed with public comment, starting with in-person public comment. If there's anyone that would like to be heard, please come to the podium. Right, I'm not seeing anybody on the phone. The questions, we're not really doing, this is questions from council, but what we're gonna do is an up or down, straw poll if we want to move this forward for an upcoming discussion. So, I don't know. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I did have a question if Councilmember Henkel should be willing to entertain, because I have no doubt that this group that you're advocating for, has significant needs, and there are things that we could probably do for them. But it's definitely one group, and from what I've heard, there are many other groups in our community that have similar needs. So what I'm wondering if you'd entertain is including this discussion into a broader discussion as to what we can do, not just for this group, but for other groups as well. But I don't want to just look at it one group in isolation, because that does have impact. We have limited funds and limited resources, I guess. So I think what I'd like to be able to do is have this discussion more holistically and be able to figure out, okay, what can we do overall as a community, as a city, better to help both this group and other, maybe, I guess neighbors in need was the term you used. How we can help all our neighbors in need, and then I guess to try to, I'm not losing my focus here, but somehow make this more, a wider discussion and more holistic, I guess.
Right, no, I thank you for that question, and yes and no. My first answer is no in a way, because these people are on humanitarian parole and their government failed them. So this isn't something where it is a government issue per se, and where they have no place. They have been evacuated. I mean, imagine it'd be like this evacuation out here, except for you've lost your job, you've lost your whole family connections and everything. It is a vastly different population. There are other groups that do have needs, and I do think that I don't mind looking at that. But this question was about humanitarian parole, and no, the other groups are not on humanitarian parole. And
I understood that. I was more trying to see if you want to expand that discussion, because when we're looking at one group, it does impact what we can do for other groups in the community. So I would like to, it's a requesting to be able to look at it more holistically, so we know that, what we're doing, what we can do for this group, how that impacts other groups, and, how we can just, so say have more of a, just a holistic policy that's not just generated towards one group, but it's generated towards all our neighbors in need, I guess.
Yes. I don't know how we would do that specifically because of this was on the agenda item under the humanitarian parole. Additionally, I don't mind looking at that at all. I just don't want to lose sight of what the conditions were of what the 18A request was for. I have no problem looking at that.
So Councilmember Hinkle, and I kind of just looked at Nancy too, to keep me honest as well. We can do that. The direction that you all provide us, we can take a look at that if that's your direction as council.
Okay. Yes, I do want to do that.
So do we have like a dual question? Are we gonna poll council on whether they want to have a broader discussion? Or
it sounds like Councilmember Hinkle is modifying her request. So if we're looking at that slide 8, which had the list mental health, transportation, ELL, resettlement agency connections, looking at that not only for the humanitarian parole individuals, but also other individuals that might have a similar need base. I think that's what I heard.
All right, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Hinkle, thank you for this presentation and your work for our newest members of our community. It seems that Broomfield is doing a lot for our Afghan residents. However, it seems that there needs to be a larger discussion to ensure the community, staff, and council are all on the same page with regard to this issue. I think that we've had other conversations around other populations, but I think that this is a population that needs to have a conversation and a collective conversation and understanding around this new population of Broomfield. So it seems like this it needs to be a conversation in isolation. It needs to be an immediate and timely discussion because I think that we should all get on the same page for how best to support this, these members in our community, and what the needs are, and to help connect the different partners in our community. So I would prefer to have this more of a focused conversation.
And what I think, if I can respond to that, thank you, Councilmember Shaw. I think that we had a session, sort of a brainstorming session in March, is that right? On those types of items. I would also like to keep this separate than that, mainly because of the timely nature of it. That they just got here and it just needs to be more timely for this particular population.
Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me try to offer maybe a compromise approach. I think we should stay on this particular topic first and let it then draw us into what other community needs there might be for, quote, other populations. I don't know what those other populations are right now. I'm sure they're there. But I think Councilmember Hinkle's proposal gives us a way of focusing on an immediate population that's visible, but then I think to Mayor Pro Tem's recommendation, we could pull in those other communities that also may need some support for us. To me, that seems like it accomplishes both possibilities here. I offer that as a suggestion.
Always so sensible. Councilmember Crowley.
A quick question, and I agree with Councilmember Leslie. I think these are very specific and special populations that would need focus on it. I'm curious as to Councilmember Hinkle, is there a model, perhaps, Aurora is probably the county with the highest refugee population in the state, and may have or may not have gone through a lot of these issues already. Is there a place we can look to, or that you're aware of, or are we striking out on our own to create new policy?
As always, Broomfield is on the cusp of always being the leader in this. And I will tell you, one of the counties that Aurora belongs to is the county that hung up on that person. So it's very unfortunate, but I think we are moving forward. I did reach out to my metro area county commissioners group and asked them if they were doing anything. And I heard crickets. But that also doesn't mean that they don't want to help. It just means they haven't really been engaged maybe. And we have been, honestly, we've been so busy. I just told Councilman Cohen, like dinner was like my only meal today. Because we're really busy. We have kids with medical conditions that really need medical attention. That being said, it doesn't mean that we can't be leaders in this, just like we have been in oil and gas issues. And just like we have been in health and human services and other areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hinkle. I appreciate you bringing this forward. So we'll just do a roll call vote. Wait, what? Who? Oh, I forgot about you, James. Sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Marshallson.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just actually going to kind of repeat what's been said, that I do think there is other populations that we definitely need to look at as far as services and things of that nature. But since this one is the immediate one, I think I do favor doing it both, maybe not at the same time. So I was already planning on bringing up the second part of it, or the larger populations, at our focus group sessions coming up. So yeah, that's kind of the direction I would prefer to go to. Do it separately. This is the immediate, and then move on to other groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And this is super helpful, this discussion of like which group we're focusing on, but could I get a clarification, maybe an interpretation from staff, like what are we really looking at here? Are we just like how much, like I know we have so many important topics being discussed, and as we're moving to wildfire mitigation, and this is something that always comes up, as staff time. Like how much staff time do we have to devote to this? And we just got done, talking about all these great nonprofits and we're working with and funding, and I'd just like to hear a little bit about how this fits into, how much time is this going to take to figure out how we can help? If there's any, so I don't know if we're committed, that's something.
Yeah, I mean, so Councilmember Anderson, thank you for that question. I think a couple things. It depends on what the ultimate direction of council is in regards to how much staff time it's going to take. I'm not trying to be elusive, but that will be a determining factor. To Councilmember Hinkle's question, I don't know if it was a question, but point about not waiting for the council retreat. I was just looking at the internal agenda. That is going to be really tough. We only have one study session in February, which now also has a special meeting to follow it, which Andrew was talking about earlier. So it might be a little bit tough for February, not necessarily impossible. I never like to say that, but we would have to take a look at that and where it falls in the list of priorities from council. So yeah, I think it's just going to depend ultimately on what direction and what research we need to do in order to come back to you and kind of fully flesh out whatever your direction is. And additionally, I just want to say too, and maybe I'm going a little off the cuff here, so forgive me, just working a lot with Clay and other departments, the library is very different in regards to philosophy. I feel like I can say that confidently, having worked in that profession for 20 years. I want to be mindful too that what we do does impact other things. Council understands that this is a policy decision. So I just want to throw that out there, that we need to be really mindful of whatever decisions made, not yes or a no for me, but just that we're mindful of the impacts that would have. And I think that would have to be part of the conversation. So that will take a little bit of step as well.
Okay. I think I missed the part where we're just moving into a place where we're having a discussion at upcoming study session that would then provide direction. Is that?
I think the original thought was this would be part of the council retreat discussion, which I think is March 4th or 4th and 5th. I think it's that first weekend in March. I think Councilmember Hinkle had asked, is there a way to do it sooner? And that's kind of the conundrum we're under, that there's only one study session in February that's also followed by a special meeting. And I think there's an executive session before the study session.
I do believe you're correct. So we have a lot already. Go ahead, Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's the part about, I think, reaching out to our resettlement agencies. They can help fill in those gaps, I feel, like what their needs are. And we can find outside support as well, because I don't want this to be all on staff necessarily.
Thank you. So
knowing that this probably won't get on a February agenda, because I know how packed they are, it probably will have to be in March. So, we just don't meet that often. We have a short month. So, Councilmember Cohen?
I'm just curious whether if you're looking for city policy of how to treat humanitarian parole, or what options we might have, if I understand correctly. Is that something that has to be done by staff, or could be farmed out? In other words, find a researcher at CU, where we're surrounded by universities, people who study these type of topics, who might be willing to come back and give us a report on what they see as feasible services by the city Kevin government for humanitarian parole. I don't know if that's an option or if you've done that before.
I think one of the challenges with that, Councilmember Cohen, is a lot would be dependent on the resources that Broomfield has. And as a city and county, we're slightly odd duck. So even if we found somebody with a lot of knowledge about municipal or county governments and what services they could provide, it's still going to come back to staff to figuring out, can we provide transportation, flex ride options, or ELL support? But I like the idea of utilizing that. Maybe that helps some of the program ideas, finding out what other communities are doing with high refugee populations.
Looks like we're gonna have a discussion.
So that's kind of where I am. I think that this is a very valuable conversation, and I think that we should continue this as a focus session. I think that that's a great time to have this kind of fleshed out a little bit more, come up with some maybe higher level or how to move this forward. But I think that's a great timing to do it when we're all together and can have that conversation. So that's what I would suggest, is that we continue this conversation in the focus session.
Good, Councilmember Ledden.
I'm picking up on the thought that, that this is not the first refugee issue we have experienced in this country. There have been waves of them, and over a long period of time. So my suggestion is that perhaps the best way to approach this for us then to have a study session on it would be for staff to identify maybe one other community that seems to have done well. And perhaps that community representative could then speak to us, whether it's a member of the staff of that community or an agency in that community that could maybe speak to how they have responded to an issue that they experienced in the recent past. Otherwise, I don't know what we're going to be talking about. So I'd rather us be able to have something that doesn't take a lot of staff time, except to identify maybe a community that would be willing to give us some time, a couple hours of their time, so that we can have that discussion with them. So my suggestion. Thank you.
Councilmember Henkel?
One more thought here. Thanks to everyone for your thoughts and ideas. I will say that a lot of these families have been here since December. They're stuck in their homes. And a lot of them have post-traumatic stress disorder, and they don't have access to a place like the rec center for mental health. That's a huge thing for them. The places that they go to right now are the dentist. They go get their blood drawn so they can go for immigration status, for green cards. A lot of them have medical appointments. These are the places that they go. They don't know anything different in Broomfield other than getting poked and getting heard on, where are you at with your money, and possibly going shopping and going to fish to go get food, or a precious child to go get clothes. I would like for these families to enjoy something out of Broomfield. And I do think it is an issue, and if any of you guys have experienced, like my husband has with PTSD, the longer you wait on it, the worse it gets. It's particularly if you're in isolation and you can't drive anywhere. I've asked thousands of people for donated cars, nothing. We don't have much in the way of funding for these families other than their basic needs. I just want to throw that out there that this is a crisis in these families, and one of these families lost their dad in the explosion, and it's a daily reminder of just how isolated they are.
Thank you. So we'll do a roll call vote to move this forward to, well, the first available time, whether it can be a study session before. If not, it will be the focus session. That will be the next opportunity when we're all together. Is that amenable? And we'll just do a yes or no. Thank you. Yeah.
Weird. Lamb.
Yes.
Lindstedt.
Yes.
Marsh Holston.
Yes.
Shack.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Cohen.
Yes.
Engel.
Yes.
Jezerski. Leslie.
Yes.
Well, that passes unanimously. So we do agree that we need to tackle this as a council, and we'll get to it as soon as possible. And thank you for bringing it forward, Councilman Hinkle. All right, well, that concludes our business for this evening's agenda. Is there any other business to come before the council?